The deed was worth $35, but what Harlan Beck found hanging in that barn would cost him everything: his peace, his safety, and maybe his soul. 3 Apache sisters' nooses around their necks, feet barely touching the ground, still breathing, still alive. In the Arizona territory of 1884, some men bought land with money, others bought it with blood. But when Harlan cut those ropes, he wasn't just saving 3 lives, he was declaring war on the most powerful men in the territory. This is the story of how one man's simple act of decency sparked a battle that would reshape the meaning of justice in the West. I'm sharing this tale from the dusty archives of forgotten heroes. Comment below where you're watching from, so I know how far this story of courage has traveled. The Arizona sun hammered down like God's own anvil as Harlan Beck rode up to what was supposed to be his new beginning. $35, that's all it had cost him. Every penny he'd saved from 3 years of breaking horses and mending fences. The deed in his vest pocket felt heavier than gold as his horse picked its way through the scrubland toward the cluster of buildings that made up Dry Laurel Ranch. "Easy there, Colonel," he murmured to his mount, a scarred bay gelding who'd seen better days. The horse's ears flicked nervously, and Harlan felt it too, something wrong in the air, thick as the dust that coated everything in this God-forsaken stretch of territory. The main house stood silent, its windows dark despite the blazing afternoon. No smoke from the chimney, no movement in the yard. Even the chickens were gone, leaving only a few scattered feathers dancing in the hot breeze. Harlan's hand drifted to the Colt on his hip, a gesture born from too many years learning that silence in the desert usually meant death. He dismounted near the water trough, bone dry with a film of green scum baked hard at the bottom. The well's rope had been cut, its frayed end swaying like a hanged man's last dance. His jaw tightened. Whatever had happened here, someone hadn't wanted anyone staying long. The barn door stood slightly ajar, creaking on its hinges with each gust of wind. Harlan approached slowly, his spurs singing a lonely song against the hard-packed earth. He pushed the door open with his boot, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness within. That's when he saw them. 3 figures suspended from the rafters, silhouetted against the strips of sunlight that leaked through the barn's planked walls. His heart stopped, then started again, racing as he heard it. A ragged whistling breath, then another. "Jesus Christ," he breathed, already moving. They were alive, barely but alive. The first girl, she couldn't have been more than 20, had her toes stretched down, just touching an overturned bucket that kept the noose from taking her full weight. Her face was purple, dark eyes closed, but her chest rose and fell in desperate, shallow gasps. The second hung from a shorter rope, her feet dancing on empty air, held up only by her bound hands gripping the rope above her head. The third, the youngest by the look of her, had somehow hooked one foot around a support beam, taking just enough pressure off her throat to keep breathing. Harlan didn't think he moved. His knife was out before he'd fully processed what he was seeing. He grabbed the first girl around the waist, lifting her to take the weight off her neck, and sawed through the rope. She collapsed against him, a dead weight that nearly took them both down. He laid her gently on the barn floor and moved to the second. "Hold on," he said, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. "Just hold on." The second girl's eyes fluttered open as he cut her down, dark eyes full of terror that shifted to confusion when she saw his face. She tried to speak, but only managed a horrible croaking sound. The third girl, barely more than a child, fell into his arms like a broken bird, her whole body trembling. Harlan worked with desperate efficiency, cutting the ropes from their wrists, checking for breath, for heartbeat. All 3 lived, though he couldn't say for how long. The barn felt like a tomb, the air thick with the smell of fear and something else, kerosene. Someone had doused the walls. They'd meant to burn this place, destroy the evidence. He needed to get them inside, needed water, needed... The first girl's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. Her eyes were open now, fierce despite the bruising around her throat. She tried to speak, failed, tried again. "Don't She rasped the word barely audible. Don't trust. Then her eyes rolled back and she went limp. Harlan looked at the three unconscious forms and made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't leave them here. Whoever had done this might come back to finish the job, but taking them into the house, caring for them, that would make him a target too. He thought of the $35 he'd paid for this land. The man at the land office had seemed nervous, eager to close the deal. Too eager, Harlan realized now he'd bought more than a ranch, he'd bought someone else's war. But war or not, he wasn't the kind of man who could walk away from three young women hanging in a barn. His mother hadn't raised him that way, and neither had the Apache scouts who'd taught him to track when he was younger. He recognized the girls' features now, Apache probably from one of the bands that had been forced onto the reservation at San Carlos. What they were doing here, who had tried to kill them, those were questions for later. First, he had to keep them alive. He carried them one by one to the main house, his back screaming with the effort. The house had been ransacked, furniture, overturned cupboards, emptied papers scattered across the floor like snow. But the stove still worked, and there was a hand pump in the kitchen that groaned but produced water. Harlan laid the three girls on whatever soft surfaces he could find, a torn mattress dragged from the bedroom, a pile of curtains pulled from the windows, a horse blanket that smelled of smoke but was better than the bare floor. He worked methodically the way he'd seen field surgeons work during his time in the cavalry. Water first, just drops on their cracked lips, then checking for other injuries, bruised ribs, rope burns, cuts that needed cleaning. The sun was setting by the time the first girl stirred again. Harlan had managed to get the stove going and had found some dried beans and a tin of peaches that had rolled under the pantry shelves. He was heating water, thinking about making some kind of broth, when he heard movement behind him. She was sitting up watching him with those dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail, his movements, his weapons, the exits. Her hand was at her throat, massaging the angry red marks the rope had left. Water, Harlan said, reaching slowly for a cup. You need water. She didn't move as he approached, didn't flinch when he held out the cup. But she didn't take it either, just watched him with that unblinking stare. I cut you down, he said unnecessarily. You were... He gestured at his own throat. I own this place now, bought it yesterday. The deed's in my pocket if you want to see it. Something shifted in her expression, not quite trust, but a lessening of immediate hostility. She reached for the cup, her movements careful, controlled. When she drank, it was in small sips, her eyes never leaving his face. My sisters, she said, her voice rough as sandpaper. Alive, Harlan assured her. Sleeping, but alive. She looked past him to where the other two lay, and for the first time he saw emotion crack through her careful control, relief so profound it made her shoulders shake. I'm Harlan Beck, he said, stepping back to give her space. I don't know what happened here, but you're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you while you're under my roof. She studied him for a long moment, then said, Anoki. My name is Anoki. It means tall sky in my mother's tongue. Your sisters, Sana and Tevi, Rain and Dawn. She tried to stand swayed and accepted his steadying hand on her elbow with visible reluctance. We should not be here. You should not have cut us down. Well, I did, Harlan said, and unless you've got somewhere else to go, you're staying put until you're healed up. You don't understand. Anoki's voice was getting stronger but also more urgent. They will come back. They always come back. Who did this to you? Before she could answer, hoofbeats thundered in the yard outside. Not one horse, many. Harlan moved to the window, pushing aside the torn curtain carefully. 7 riders, all armed, arranged in a semicircle facing the house. The man in the center sat his horse like he owned the world. Expensive hat, silver conchos on his vest. A pearl-handled pistol visible in its tooled leather holster. Mr. Beck, the man called out, his voice carrying easily across the yard. Harlan Beck, new owner of Dry Laurel Ranch. I'm Silas Crane, and I believe we need to have a conversation about property rights. Anoki had moved up behind him, peering out the window. When she saw Crane, she made a sound not quite a gasp, more like a growl. "That's him," she whispered, "the one who gave the order." Harlan's hand found his Colt again. 7 against 1 weren't good odds, especially when he had 3 injured women to protect. But he'd faced worse odds before and lived to tell about it. "Stay inside," he told Anoki. "Keep your sisters quiet if they wake." He walked out onto the porch, making sure to keep his hand visible, but away from his weapon. No sense in starting a shooting match he couldn't win. "Mr. Crane," he said, nodding politely. "Nice of you to come calling. Usually neighbors bring a pie or something, not a small army." Crane smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "I think you'll find the usual rules don't apply out here, Beck. You see, you've got something that belongs to me." "That's so, because according to this deed, everything on this property belongs to me now." "Not everything." Crane leaned forward and swung his saddle. "There are 3 Apache whores who stole from me, killed one of my men. They were being held for justice when someone," his eyes glinted, "interfered." "Haven't seen any whores," Harlan said evenly, "Apache or otherwise." "No." "Then you won't mind if my boys take a look around?" "Actually, I would mind. See where I come from. A man's home is his castle. You want to search my property, you can come back with a warrant and a real lawman, not just hired guns." The silence stretched taut as a hangman's rope. One of Crane's men shifted leather, creaking, and Harlan marked him young, nervous, probably quick on the draw, but likely to miss his first shot. "You seem like a reasonable man, Beck," Crane said finally. "So let me be reasonable with you. Those 3 savages have something that belongs to me, something valuable. You hand them over and I'll make it worth your while. Hell, I'll buy this ranch from you for 10 times what you paid. You can ride out of here a rich man. And if I haven't seen them, then by sunset tomorrow you'll wish you had." Crane straightened in his saddle. "See, Beck, there are 2 kinds of men in this territory, those who work with me and those who burn. You've got until sunset tomorrow to decide which you are." He turned his horse and his men followed. But before they disappeared into the gathering darkness, Crane called back over his shoulder, "Oh, and Beck, you might want to check your well. Sometimes dead animals fall in, contaminate the water, something awful. Would hate for you to get sick your first week here." They rode off in a cloud of dust, leaving Harlan standing on the porch with his jaw clenched and his mind racing. He waited until the hoofbeats faded, then went back inside. All 3 sisters were awake now, huddled together on the torn mattress. The youngest, Tevi, was crying silently, tears tracking through the dirt on her face. Sana, the middle sister, had her arms around both of them, her expression fierce and protective. "You should have let us die," Anoki said flatly. "Now he'll kill you too." "Maybe," Harlan admitted, "but I've been in tough spots before. What's this valuable thing he thinks you have?" The sisters exchanged glances, conducting an entire conversation without words. Finally, Anoki spoke. "Our father was a surveyor for the army. Before they forced us onto the reservation, he mapped water sources all through this territory. Hidden springs, underground rivers, aquifers that could turn desert into farmland." "Water," Harlan said, understanding flooding through him. "In Arizona, that's more valuable than gold. Father knew they would kill him for it eventually." Sana spoke for the first time, her voice soft but steady. "So he destroyed the original map. But first he taught each of us one part of it. The whole map exists only in our memories, and only when all 3 of us are together." "That's why they couldn't just kill you," Harlan said. "They need all 3 of you alive." "They tried to make us talk," Tevi whispered. "Hurt us. When we wouldn't break, they decided to hang us as an example. Make other Apache families give up their knowledge. But they were going to keep us conscious as long as possible," Anoki added bitterly. "Let us hang for hours, maybe days before we died. Crane likes to make examples." Harlan walked to the stove, poured himself a cup of the bitter coffee he'd managed to brew, His mind was working, calculating odds and angles. So if I hand you over, Crane gets his map and probably kills you anyway, once you've told him what he wants to know. Yes. And if I don't, he burns me out and takes you anyway. Yes. Well, Harlan said, taking a sip of coffee, seems to me there's a third option. Anoki raised an eyebrow, which is, we make our stand together. I didn't survive 3 years in the cavalry and 5 years of breaking horses just to get pushed off my own land by some fancy-dressed thug. You would fight for us? Sana asked, disbelief clear in her voice. We're nothing to you, Apache, the enemy, as your people say. Harlan set down his cup and looked at each of them in turn. My mother was taken captive by Comanche when she was 16. They could have killed her, sold her, done worse. Instead, an old woman in the tribe protected her, taught her, made her part of the family. She lived with them for 3 years before the army rescued her. She never forgot that kindness, and she made sure I never forgot it either. He moved to the window, checking the yard again. Besides, any man who'd string up 3 young women to die slow isn't a man who deserves to win. So the question is, are you strong enough to fight? Because come sunset tomorrow, we're going to need every hand that can hold a gun. We can fight, Anoki said firmly. Our father taught us, but Crane has many men, 20, maybe 30. Numbers don't always tell the whole story, Harlan said. This house is solid adobe walls, 2 feet thick, good cover. And if Crane wanted you dead, you'd be dead. He needs you alive, which means he can't just burn us out or shoot the place to pieces. He'll try to smoke us out, Tevi said quietly. It's what he does. Fire and smoke until people have to run, then his men pick them off. Then we'd better be ready for fire. Harlan started mental inventory. There's an old root cellar out back, saw it when I rode in. If we stock it with water supplies, it could be a fallback position. And that barn, if we clear out the kerosene, set up some defensive positions. You're really going to do this, Anoki said, and for the first time there was something like respect in her voice. Fight a war you didn't start for people you don't know. Well, when you put it like that, it does sound a bit foolish, Harlan admitted with a wry smile. But I've been foolish before and lived through it. Besides, you 3 are the only neighbors I've got for 20 miles. Be ashamed to lose you so soon. And a sound made them all freeze, horses, distant, but getting closer. Harlan moved to the window again, then relaxed slightly. Just one rider, coming slow. A few minutes later, a voice called out from the darkness. Hello, the house. I'm Marshal Ethan Vale, federal law. I'm coming in peaceful. Harlan stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, but pointed down. The man who rode into the yard was younger than expected, maybe 30, with the kind of straight-backed posture that spoke of military service. The badge on his vest caught the lamplight from the house. Marshal, Harlan greeted him, bit late for a social call. Mr. Beck heard you just bought this place. Vale dismounted, moving slow and easy, hands visible. Also heard Silas Crane paid you a visit. News travels fast. It does when Crane's involved. Vale's eyes flicked to the house. Mind if we talk inside? What I've got to say isn't for anyone who might be listening out here. Harlan considered, then nodded. Once inside, Vale took in the scene the 3 Apache sisters, the ransacked room, the defensive preparations already beginning. So it's true, he said softly. You found them. You knew, Anoki demanded. Suspected. I've been tracking Crane's operation for months. The land grabs, the water rights, the mysterious disappearances. When I heard 3 Apache women had been taken from the reservation, supposedly for theft and murder. He shook his head. Crane's bought most of the local law, but federal authority still means something out here. Can you arrest him? Harlan asked. Not without proof, and not without backup, but I'm working on both. Vale pulled a leather journal from his coat. I've been collecting evidence, testimonies from families Crane has driven off their land, records of payments to local officials. If I can get enough, I can bring in federal troops from Fort Grant. How long would that take? 2 weeks, maybe 3. We don't have 2 weeks, Harlan said. Crane gave us until sunset tomorrow. Vale was quiet for a moment, then said, I can't officially help you, but unofficially. He set a box of ammunition on the table. I was heading out to check on some homesteaders, thought they might need these supplies. Shame if I lost them along the way. Shame indeed, Harlan agreed. There's more, Vale said, turning to the sisters. Your father's map, Crane's not the only one who wants it. There's a syndicate back east, railroad men and bankers. They're planning to buy up all the land once they know where the water is. Turn the whole territory into their private empire. Let me guess, Harlan said. Crane's just the local muscle. Exactly. The man pulling his strings is named Gideon Pike, runs the territorial bank, has connections all the way to Washington. Even if we stop Crane Pike, we'll just send someone else. Unless we stop them both, Anoki said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. My father knew this day would come, she continued. He said the map was both a blessing and a curse. In the right hands, it could help our people, help all the people of this territory. In the wrong hands, she trailed off. What are you thinking? Harlan asked. Crane expects us to run or hide or die. What if we do something else? What if we bring the fight to them, but on our terms? An ambush, Vale asked. No, something better, a trap that uses the law itself. Anoki stood swaying slightly but determined. Marshal, you said you need proof. What if we could get Crane to confess in front of witnesses? How? By giving him what he wants or making him think we are. If he believes he's won, he'll get careless. Proud men always do. Harlan found himself smiling. You've got a plan. The beginning of one, but we'll need help. The townsfolk, the ones who've been hurt by Crane, would they stand with us if they thought we could win? Some might, Vale said slowly. Old Mateo Ortiz at the livery, he lost his son to Crane's men. Doc Rosamond Pike, she's patched up too many people Crane's thugs have beaten. There are others, but they're scared. Fear can turn to courage if people see a spark, Sana said, speaking up. Our grandmother used to say that. Then we'll give them a spark, Harlan decided. Marshal, can you get word to the people you trust? Tell them to be ready but not to do anything yet. I can do that. But Beck, you understand what you're risking here. This isn't your fight. Harlan looked at the 3 sisters, saw the mixture of hope and determination in their faces. It is now. Vale left shortly after disappearing into the darkness as quietly as he'd come. The sisters insisted on helping Harlan with the preparations, though he tried to make them rest. They worked through the night, turning the ranch into a defensible position. Tavy proved surprisingly knowledgeable about explosives. Her uncle had worked in the copper mines. She showed Harlan how to rig simple alarms using wire and empty cans, how to create choke points that would funnel attackers into killing fields. Sana had an artist's eye for detail and a memory like a steel trap. She sketched out the ranch's layout, marking sightlines and blind spots, planning escape routes and fallback positions. Anoki coordinated everything with the quiet efficiency of a general. She also revealed another skill she could shoot. Her father had taught all 3 sisters, but Anoki had a natural gift. Even with her injuries, she could put 5 shots into a playing card at 30 paces. As dawn approached, painting the eastern sky, the color of blood and gold, Harlan stood on the porch with his coffee, surveying their preparations. The barn had been cleared and reinforced. The root cellar was stocked. Weapons were cleaned and loaded, positioned at key windows. You should have let us die, Anoki said, joining him on the porch. She'd found some of his spare clothes to replace her torn dress. They hung loose on her frame, but she wore them with dignity. You said that before. I meant it before. Now. She was quiet for a moment. No white man has ever risked anything for us. Most won't even look us in the eye, but you cut us down, and now you're ready to die defending us. Why? Harlan thought about it, sipping his coffee. My mother used to tell me a story about a man who found an injured wolf in a trap. Everyone told him to leave. It said wolves were nothing but trouble, but he freed it anyway, nursed it back to health. Years later, when bandits came to his farm, that wolf returned with its pack. They fought alongside him, saved his family. And you think we're wolves? I think everybody deserves a chance to prove what they are, not what others say they are. Anoki studied his profile in the growing light. You're not what I expected from a man who'd buy a ranch for $35. Disappointed. No, she said softly, surprised. A dust cloud on the horizon ended their conversation. Riders still distant but coming fast. Harlan counted 12, maybe 15. That's not Crane, Anoki said, shading her eyes. He'd bring more men. She was right. As the riders got closer, Harlan recognized the lead figure, Sheriff Bram Crow Crane's bought and paid for lawman. This was the opening move, not the final assault. Get your sisters ready, Harlan told Anoki. This is where it starts. Sheriff Crow and his posse pulled up in the yard, spreading out in a practiced formation. The sheriff himself was a big man gone to fat with a badge that had lost its shine and eyes that had lost their honesty years ago. Harlan Beck, he called out, not bothering to dismount. I'm here on official business. That's so. Harlan stayed on the porch, rifle casual in his hands. What kind of business? Got a warrant here for 3 Apache women wanted for theft and murder. Have reason to believe they might be on your property. A warrant, mind if I see it. Crow pulled a paper from his vest, held it up but not close enough to read. All legal and proper. Now you going to cooperate, or do we need to search the place? That paper signed by a judge, signed by me, that's all the authority I need in this county. Funny thing about that, Harlan said. This ranch sits right on the county line. Some might say it's in federal jurisdiction. Might need a federal marshal to enforce anything here. Crow's bands reddened. Don't play games with me, Beck. I know they're in there. Hand them over and this stays civilized. And if I don't have any Apache women here, then you won't mind us looking. Actually, I would mind. See, Sheriff, I've heard about you. How you collect taxes that never make it to the territorial government. How people who cross you end up face down in arroyos. So forgive me if I don't trust you to look without stealing everything that isn't nailed down. One of Crow's deputies, younger and nervous, shifted his hand toward his gun. Harlan marked him, already calculating angles. That's a serious accusation, Crow said, his voice dangerous now. It's a serious world, Sheriff. Now, unless you've got real law behind you, I suggest you and your boys head back to town. This is private property. You're making a mistake, Beck. Crane doesn't like people who don't cooperate. Then Crane and I have something in common. I don't like people who string up young women and leave them to die slow. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Several of Crow's men exchanged glances. Apparently not all of them knew the full story of what they were involved in. Sunset, Crow said finally. Mr. Crane's offer stands until sunset. After that, he shrugged. After that, badge or no badge, nothing's going to save you. They rode off in a cloud of dust and threats, leaving Harlan standing on the porch with war in his heart and determination in his bones. Inside, the 3 sisters were armed and ready, their faces set with the kind of resolve that comes from having already survived the worst. They'll be back, Tivy said quietly. Yes, Harlan agreed, but when they come, we'll be ready. The morning passed with tense preparation. Harlan rode the property's perimeter, checking their defensive positions and looking for weaknesses. He found fresh horse tracks near the eastern ridge, scouts watching the ranch. Crane was being careful, planning his approach. Around midday, unexpected visitors arrived. Old Mateo Ortiz drove up in his wagon with Doc Rosamond Pike beside him. In the wagon bed were 4 other townspeople, men and women who'd suffered under Crane's rule. Marshal Vale said you might need help. Ortiz said, his weathered face grim. We're not fighters, but we're tired of being afraid. This isn't your fight, Harlan warned them. Isn't it? Doc Pike asked. She was a handsome woman in her 40s with steel-gray hair and steady hands. Crane killed Mateo's boy, beat the Hendricks family near to death when they wouldn't sell their water rights, had his men assault my nurse because she wouldn't. She stopped, composed herself. We all have reasons to be here. Harlan looked at the small group of would-be defenders. They weren't soldiers, but they had something perhaps more valuable, righteous anger, and the desperation of people with nothing left to lose. All right, he said, but we do this smart. No heroes, no stupid risks. The goal is to survive until we can expose Crane for what he is. They spent the afternoon preparing. Doc Pike set up a medical station in the root cellar. Ortiz and the others helped reinforce the windows and doors, creating firing positions and escape routes. The Apache sisters worked alongside them, and Harlan noticed how the townspeople's initial wariness gradually gave way to respect as they saw the young women's courage and competence. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains painting the desert, in shades of orange and red, a lone rider approached under a white flag. It was one of Crane's men, a gunslinger Harlan recognized from wanted posters, Jake "Deadshot" Morrison. Mr. Crane wants to make one last offer, Morrison called out, stopping well outside rifle range. He's willing to pay you $50,000 for the ranch and the women. Cash money. You could live like a king in California with that kind of stake. Tell Crane my answer hasn't changed, Harlan replied. He said you'd say that. Also said to tell you he's got 30 men surrounding this place. Come full dark if you haven't accepted his offer, he's going to burn you out. The women will watch you die before he takes them. 30 men. Harlan made himself laugh. For one broken-down horse trainer and 3 injured women, Crane must be more scared than I thought. Morrison's face darkened. You're a fool, Beck. Maybe, but I'm a fool who owns this land legal and proper. And in about 2 minutes you're going to be trespassing. I'd ride out now if I were you. After Morrison left, Harlan gathered everyone in the main room. The sun was touching the horizon now, painting everything the color of fresh blood. They'll come with the darkness, he said. Probably try to set fires first. Drive us into the open. Everyone remember their positions. And remember, we don't have to win. We just have to survive long enough for help to arrive, or for Crane to make a mistake. What if help doesn't come? Tavy asked quietly. Then we make our own help, Anoki said firmly. She had strapped on a gun belt, and despite her injuries, she looked formidable. Our father used to say that courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about doing what needs to be done despite the fear. As if in response to her words, fire arrows began arcing through the darkening sky, trailing flame like falling stars. Most fell short, but a few thudded into the barn's walls. The battle for Dry Laurel Ranch had begun. Positions, Harlan shouted, and everyone moved. The first probe came from the north, 5 men rushing the barn with torches. Anoki and Sana, positioned at the upper windows of the house, opened fire. Their shots were careful measured, designed to wound and discourage rather than kill. 2 attackers went down, the others retreated. Good shooting, Harlan called to them, but he knew this was just the beginning. More fire arrows came, and now some found their mark. The barn's roof began to smolder, and Harlan had to make a choice: defend the house or save the barn. Ortiz, take Henderson and put out that fire, he ordered. We'll cover you. The old man nodded and rushed out with one of the townspeople carrying buckets of precious water. Gunfire erupted from the darkness, but Harlan and Doc Pike laid down covering fire, keeping the attackers' heads down. Then came the sound Harlan had been dreading, breaking glass from the back of the house. They were trying to come in from multiple directions. "Tavy, watch the back," he shouted, but the youngest sister was already moving her rifle at the ready. The next hour was chaos. Attacks came from every direction, probing, testing, looking for weakness. The defenders were stretched thin, running from window to window, trying to cover every approach. The barn was lost despite their efforts, going up in flames that lit the entire ranch like daylight. It was during a brief lull that Anoki grabbed Harlan's arm. "Listen," she said. At first, he heard nothing over the crackle of the burning barn, then hoofbeats, many hoofbeats from the east. "Reinforcements for Crane?" he asked. "No," Anoki said, and for the first time since he'd cut her down, she smiled. "That's Apache." They came out of the darkness like ghosts. 20 Apache warriors, some from the reservation, others from bands still hiding in the mountains. They hit Crane's men from behind, war cries splitting the night as arrows and bullets found their marks. "Your people," Harlan asked Anoki, "my father's brothers. Word reached them about what Crane tried to do to us." Her smile was fierce now. Family protects family. The tide of battle turned in minutes. Caught between the defenders in the house and the Apache warriors outside, Crane's men began to panic. Some fled into the desert. Others threw down their weapons and surrendered. But Crane himself wasn't among them. "Where is he?" Harlan demanded, grabbing one of the surrendered gunmen. "Gone," the man gasped. "Rode out when the Apache hit us. Said something about finishing this legal-like." Before Harlan could respond, Marshal Vale rode up with a squad of federal soldiers from Fort Grant. "Sorry we're late," he said, surveying the battlefield. "Had to convince the colonel this was worth his time. The Apache attack helped nothing gets the army moving like Indians on the warpath." "They're not on the warpath," Harlan said firmly. "They're protecting their family." Vale nodded. "I know, but Crane's going to spin this differently. He's probably already on his way to the territorial capital claiming Apache are massacring settlers. He'll have the army here by noon tomorrow and not on our side." "Then we need to move fast," Anoki said. She turned to her uncles, spoke rapidly in Apache, then faced Vale. "My uncles found something in Crane's camp ledger's documents, proof of the conspiracy." One of the Apache warriors rode forward, handed Vale a leather satchel. The marshal opened it, whistled low. "This is it," he said. "Payment records, forged deeds, even letters from Pike outlining the whole scheme. This is enough to bring them all down. But only if we can get it to the right people before Crane spins his version," Harlan pointed out. "There's a judge in Tucson," Vale said. "Federal judge can't be bought. If we can get this to him, get the sisters to testify." "We'll testify," Anoki said immediately. "But Crane won't let us get to Tucson alive." "No," Harlan agreed. "He won't. Unless—" he smiled slowly. "Unless we make him think he's already won." It took most of the night to set up the deception. The Apache warriors disappeared back into the desert, but not before Anoki's uncle pulled Harlan aside. "You saved my brother's daughters," he said in accented English. "This makes you family. If you need us, we will come." And by dawn, the ranch looked like a massacre. The barn was ashes, the house damaged, fake blood splashed dramatically around. The bodies of the defenders lay in the yard covered with blankets. Hidden beneath those blankets, very much alive, were the three sisters and several townspeople. Crane arrived just after sunrise with Sheriff Crow, Gideon Pike, and a platoon of territorial militia. They rode in cautiously, guns drawn, expecting resistance. "Looks like your Apache friends got carried away," Crane called out to the seemingly empty house. "Beck, you alive in there?" Harlan stumbled out onto the porch, his shirt torn and bloodied with chicken blood from Doc Pike's supplies, looking defeated. "They're dead," he croaked. "The Apache. They killed them all." Crane dismounted, unable to hide his satisfaction. The three sisters, dead, burned in the barn. Harlan gestured weakly at the smoldering ruins. "Well, that's unfortunate," Pike said, though he didn't sound upset. "Without them, finding that water will be difficult." "Not impossible, though," Crane said. "Their father had to have left other records, other clues. We'll find them." He turned to the militia captain. "Captain, I want you to witness this. Mr. Beck here is selling me his ranch. Aren't you, Beck?" Harlan nodded miserably. Just let me go. I want no part of this anymore." "Of course, Crow, get the papers." As the sheriff produced a deed transfer, obviously prepared in advance, Marshal Vale rode up with the federal soldiers. "Stand down, Marshal," the militia captain ordered. "This is a territorial matter now." "Actually, it's not," Vale said calmly. "Mr. Beck, are you signing that deed under duress?" Harlan hesitated, playing his part. "Because if you are, that's a federal crime, extortion across territorial lines." "No one's forcing anything," Crane said smoothly. "Beck's selling of his own free will, right, Beck?" This was the moment. Harlan straightened up, the defeat leaving his face. "Actually, Mr. Crane, I've changed my mind. I'm not selling." Crane's face darkened. "Now see here. And another thing," Harlan continued. "Those three sisters you wanted so bad, they're not dead." On cue, Anoki, Sana, and Tevi threw off their blankets and stood up very much alive and holding rifles. "They're also not thieves or murderers," Vale added. "But they do have some interesting things to say about attempted murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy to defraud the federal government of territorial lands." "This is absurd," Pike sputtered. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, we can." Vale held up the leather satchel. "Your own records, Mr. Pike. Very detailed, very incriminating." Crane went for his gun, but Anoki's rifle was already aimed at his chest. "Don't," she said quietly. "You had your chance to kill me. You failed." The federal soldiers moved in, disarming Crane's men and the confused territorial militia. Sheriff Crow tried to run, but was tackled by old Mateo Ortiz, who, despite his age, still had some fight in him. "Silas Crane, Gideon Pike, Bram Crow," Marshal Vale announced formally. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted murder, extortion, and about a dozen other charges I'll think of on the way to Tucson." As the federal soldiers led them away in chains, Crane turned back to Harlan. "You have no idea what you've done," he snarled down. "The people I work for, they don't forgive and they don't forget." "Then they'll have to get in line," Harlan replied. "I've got a long list of people who don't like me much." The aftermath took days to sort out. The federal judge in Tucson, presented with the evidence and the sisters' testimony, not only convicted Crane and his conspirators, but also issued a ruling that would reshape water rights in the territory. No one could claim water sources on or near Apache lands without tribal approval. The three sisters, given the choice to return to the reservation or stay, chose to remain at Dry Laurel Ranch. "This place nearly killed us," Anoki explained to Harlan, "but it also gave us our lives back. We'd like to help you run it if you'll have us. Equal partners." "Equal partners." Harlan agreed, shaking hands with each sister in turn. As the weeks passed, the ranch began to prosper. The sisters' knowledge of water sources, combined with Harlan's horse training skills and the support of grateful townspeople, turned Dry Laurel into one of the most successful ranches in the territory. One evening, as the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in the brilliant reds and purples that Harlan had come to love, he stood on the porch with Anoki. They watched Sana teaching some local children to track rabbits, while Tevi worked on irrigation channels she'd designed. "That $35, Anoki said suddenly. "Best investment you ever made." Harlan thought about it, about the gunfights and the fear, about the moment he'd cut those ropes, about the alliance between Apache and townsfolk that had grown from that single act of decency. "No," he said finally, "not an investment. Investments are about profit. This was about doing what's right." Anoki smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. "My father would have liked you, Harlan Beck. I think I would have liked him too." They stood together in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The ranch was peaceful now, but Harlan knew peace in the Arizona territory was always temporary. There would be other challenges, other men like Crane who thought power came from fear and violence. But for now, Dry Laurel Ranch stood as proof that sometimes, just sometimes, courage and decency could win out over greed and cruelty. And sometimes a $35 deed could buy something worth more than all the gold in the territory, a chance to stand for what's right and people worth standing with. As night settled over the desert, Harlan heard laughter from inside the house, the sisters and some of the townspeople sharing a meal, sharing stories, building the kind of community that no amount of money could buy. He smiled and went inside to join them, leaving his rifle by the door. Tonight, at least, there was no need for it. The morning after their victory should have brought relief, but Harlan woke with a prickle of unease running down his spine. He'd learned to trust that feeling during his cavalry days. It had saved his life more than once. He found Anoki already awake, standing at the window with her rifle, watching the dawn paint the desert gold. "You feel it too," she said without turning around. "Like a storm coming, but the sky's clear. My grandmother called it the silence before thunder, when even the desert holds its breath." She finally looked at him, and he saw his own worry reflected in her dark eyes. Crane had powerful friends. They won't let this stand. As if summoned by her words, dust appeared on the horizon, not the chaotic cloud of many riders, but the purposeful plume of a single wagon moving fast. Harlan grabbed his field glasses, focused on the approaching vehicle. "It's Vale," he said, recognizing the marshal's distinctive black horse tied to the back of the wagon. "And he's pushing hard." 10 minutes later, Vale pulled into the yard, his usually composed face tight with urgency. Before the wagon had fully stopped, he was already climbing down. "We've got problems," he said without preamble. "Big ones." Crane's people, Harlan guessed. Worse. The territorial governor received a telegram from Washington. Some senator named Aldrich is claiming the Apache attacked innocent settlers, massacred civilians. He's pushing for military intervention, full-scale removal of all Apache from the territory. Anoki's hands clenched into fists. "We defended ourselves. Your soldiers saw—" "My report won't reach Washington for 2 weeks," Vale interrupted. "By then, General Morrison will already be here with 500 troops. And Beck, there's more. Gideon Pike posted bail." "What?" Harlan felt his jaw tighten. "How is that possible?" "Federal judge in Phoenix overruled Tucson, said the evidence was obtained illegally since we didn't have a proper warrant to search Crane's camp." Vale's disgust was evident. Pike's got judges in his pocket all the way up the chain. Sana and Tevi had joined them now, drawn by the raised voices. Tevi's face had gone pale at the mention of military removal. "They'll send us to Oklahoma," she whispered. "The death march. Most don't survive the journey." "Not while I'm breathing," Harlan said firmly. He turned to Vale. "How long do we have?" "Morrison's cavalry is 3 days out, maybe 4. But Pike's already back in town, and word is he's hired new guns. Not local thugs, professionals from Texas. The Coulter Gang." Harlan knew that name. Everyone west of the Mississippi did. The Coulter Gang had burned their way through 3 states, leaving bodies and ashes in their wake. They were more like a private army than outlaws, disciplined, ruthless, and expensive. "How many?" he asked. 20, maybe 25, and Beck. Vale hesitated. "Pike's put out word that anyone who helps you or the sisters will have their property seized for harboring fugitives." "So we're alone." "Not alone." Old Mateo's voice came from the wagon bed where Harlan now noticed several shapes covered by canvas. The old man pulled back the cover, revealing Doc Rosamond and 3 other townspeople. "Some of us aren't so easy to scare." "You shouldn't be here," Anoki told them. "This will only get worse." "Child," Doc Rosamond said gently, "I've been patching up Pike's victims for 10 years. If there's a chance to stop him, I'm taking it." Vale pulled out a leather portfolio heavy with documents. "I've been up all night going through territorial law. There's one thing that might help. If we can prove the original theft and murder charges against the sisters were fabricated, it invalidates everything Pike's claim, the military intervention, all of it." "The man they say we killed," Anoki said suddenly. "Tom Brennan. He was one of Crane's men." "And very much alive, last I heard," Vale added. hiding out in Mexico with a bag of Pike's gold. If we can find him, get him back here to testify. 3 days to find a man in Mexico and bring him back. Harlan shook his head. Might as well ask for the moon. Actually, a new voice said from the doorway, that might not be necessary. Everyone turned to see a man they didn't recognize, lean, weathered with the kind of careful movements that marked a professional gunfighter. Harlan's hand moved to his Colt. Easy there, friend, the stranger said, keeping his hands visible. Name's Jack Coulter. I'm here to talk. The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. Harlan didn't draw, but his hand stayed ready. You're either very brave or very stupid walking in here alone, he said. Bit of both, probably. Coulter moved to the table slow and easy. Mind if I sit? This might take a minute to explain. Harlan nodded slightly and Coulter pulled out a chair. Pike hired my boys, it's true. Offered us $10,000 to clean up his mess. But here's the thing, I knew Tom Brennan. Rode with him for a spell before he joined up with Crane. And I know for a fact he's not dead because he owes me $300 from a poker game in El Paso last month. Why tell us? Anoki asked suspiciously. Because Pike made a mistake. He had Sheriff Crow's deputy try to backshoot one of my men last night. Seems Pike wanted to pin some murders on us after we did his dirty work, make us the villains, him the hero who drove us off. Coulter's eyes went hard. I don't take kindly to betrayal. Enemy of my enemy, Harlan asked. Something like that. Plus my mother was half Apache, Lipan band down in Texas. What Pike's planning using the army to clear out all the Apache so he can grab their water rights, it doesn't sit right. Vale leaned forward. You'd testify about Brennan being alive. Better. I can take you to him. He's holed up in Nogales running a rigged faro game in a cantina called El Scorpion. Day's ride if we push hard. It's a trap, Sana said flatly. Has to be. Maybe, Coulter admitted, but let me sweeten the pot. My boys are supposed to hit this place at sunset. Pike wants a massacre he can blame on Apache raiders, but if I'm not there to lead them, he shrugged. They'll wait. They're disciplined like that. Gives you time to get Brennan. Harlan studied the man's face, looking for the tell that would reveal deception. He'd gotten good at reading people over the years, and his gut said Coulter was playing it straight, mostly. What do you get out of it? He asked. Besides screwing over Pike, I want the $10,000 he promised us. Figure if he goes down, his assets get seized. Federal government might be willing to pay a bounty for information leading to his arrest. Might be, Vale said carefully. I could make that recommendation. Then we've got a deal. Coulter stood. I'll wait for you in Nogales. El Scorpion, remember, and Beck, watch your back. Pike's got more cards to play than you know. After Coulter left, the room erupted in debate. Vale thought it was worth the risk. Anoki was suspicious, but admitted they had few options. The townspeople were divided. I'll go, Harlan decided. Vale, you stay here with the sisters. If it's a trap, you're not going alone, Anoki interrupted. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You're still recovering, and I'm the best shot here besides you. Also, I speak Spanish and know the border country. My father surveyed all through that region. I won't let you. Anoki's eyes flashed dangerously. I don't recall asking permission, Mr. Beck. Tivy stepped forward. If Anoki goes, I go. And me, Sana added. This isn't a democracy, Harlan protested. No, Anoki agreed. It's a partnership. Equal partners, remember. He wanted to argue, but the determination in their faces stopped him. These women had already survived things that would have broken most people. Who was he to tell them what risks they could or couldn't take? Fine, he said. But we do this smart. Vale, can you hold the ranch? With the townspeople's help. Yes, but Beck, if Pike figures out you've gone, he won't. We leave quiet after dark. Take the old Apache trail through the mountains. Harlan turned to Anoki. Your people used it. For generations. It's rough, but it'll cut hours off the journey. They spent the day preparing. Harlan had the unsettling feeling of arranging pieces on a chessboard while blindfolded. Too many variables, too many ways for things to go wrong. But sometimes his mother used to say you had to trust the horse to find its way in the dark. As afternoon wore on, riders began appearing on the ridges around the ranch, not approaching, just watching. Coulter's men, Vale identified through the field glasses. They're waiting, or making sure we don't run, Harlan muttered. Just before sunset, a single rider approached under a white flag. Not one of Coulter's gang, but a boy from town, maybe 14. Mr. Beck, he called nervously. I got a message from Mr. Pike. Let's hear it. The boy pulled out a paper, read in a shaking voice. To the squatter Harlan Beck and the Apache thieves he harbors. You have won a battle, but will lose the war. By federal law, I am now the appointed territorial commissioner for Indian affairs. Any Apache not on the reservation by sunset tomorrow will be considered hostile. Any white man aiding them will be charged with treason. Signed Gideon Pike by authority of the governor of Arizona Territory. The boy fled as soon as he finished reading, clearly terrified of being associated with either side. Can he do that? Tevi asked. Just appoint himself. With enough money and connections, he can do anything, Val said grimly, at least temporarily. By the time it gets sorted out in court, we'll all be dead or displaced. Anoki finished. As darkness fell, Harlan and the three sisters slipped out through the root cellar's hidden exit. They'd left horses tied in a dry wash a quarter-mile from the house, and they moved toward them silent as shadows. Harlan had to admit the sisters knew how to move through the desert. Even injured, they made less noise than him. The Apache trail was worse than rough. It was barely a goat track in places, winding through narrow canyons and across slopes of loose shale. But Anoki led them unerringly, guided by stars and landmarks, invisible to Harlan in the darkness. 3 hours in, as they stopped to rest, the horse's Sana suddenly grabbed Harlan's arm. Listen, she whispered. At first he heard nothing, then the distant ring of horseshoes on stone. Someone was following them. Could be coincidence, he said without conviction. No one uses this trail by accident, Anoki said. How many? They listened intently. 2, maybe 3 horses, Harlan judged. Moving careful. Pike's men, or Coulter's, making sure we're coming. They pushed harder, the trail growing more treacherous as it wound higher into the mountains. The moon rose, painting everything in silver and shadow. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit faded, but Harlan knew that didn't mean they were gone. Dawn found them on the Mexican side of the border, descending toward the sprawl of Nogales. The town was already awake, smoke rising from cooking fires, the streets beginning to fill with vendors and early customers. El Scorpion, Harlan asked a fruit seller in his limited Spanish. The man's face closed off suddenly, wary. He shook his head, claimed not to know. Let me, Anoki said. She spoke to the man in fluid Spanish, and Harlan caught enough to understand she was claiming to be looking for her cousin, who owed her money. The fruit seller relaxed, pointed down a side street. El Scorpion was exactly what Harlan expected, a cantina that had seen better days, probably before the war. Even at this early hour, he could hear voices inside the clink of bottles, the slap of cards on wood. Wait here, he told the sisters. No, Anoki said flatly. We all go or no one goes. Before he could argue, she was pushing through the cantina's bat-wing doors. Harlan cursed under his breath and followed Sana and Tevi close behind. The conversation inside stopped like someone had thrown a switch. 20 pairs of eyes turned to stare at them. 3 Apache women and a gringo, all armed, all trail dusty and tired. Not the usual morning clientele. Jack Coulter sat at a corner table, seemingly unconcerned. He raised a glass in greeting. Right on time, he said. Brennan's in the back room dealing faro. Fair warning, he's got 2 boys with him and they're jumpy. This still doesn't feel right, Sana muttered. She was proven right 30 seconds later when Tom Brennan emerged from the back room. He took one look at them and went for his gun. "It's a trap," he shouted. "Pike said you'd—" Anoki's rifle was already up the shot, deafening in the enclosed space. Brennan's gun went flying and he clutched his hand, screaming. His 2 companions started to draw, then thought better of it, as Harlan and Coulter both leveled weapons at them. "Nobody has to die here," Harlan said calmly. "Brennan, we just need you to tell the truth about what happened." "Go to hell," Brennan snarled, blood dripping from his wounded hand. "Pike owns me. I talk, I'm dead." "You don't talk, you're dead anyway," Coulter pointed out. "Pike's cleaning house. Why do you think he sent them here? He knew I'd contact them, knew they'd come for you. He's playing both sides." Before Brennan could respond, gunfire erupted outside. The cantina's windows exploded in a shower of glass as riders thundered past, firing into the building. "Down," Harlan shouted, diving behind the bar. The attack was brief but vicious, maybe 30 seconds of sustained gunfire, then hoofbeats fading into the distance. When the dust settled, 2 of the cantina's patrons were dead and several others wounded. "Rurales?" someone asked. "No," Coulter said, examining a bullet hole. "American guns, American tactics, Pike's backup plan." Brennan was on the floor, clutching a bleeding shoulder. He'd taken a ricochet. His face had gone pale, shock setting in. "They shot me," he said, disbelief in his voice. "Pike's men shot me." "Told you," Coulter said. "You're a loose end now." Doc Rosamond always said pain had a way of clarifying a man's priorities. Brennan proved her right. "I'll talk," he gasped. "I'll tell everything. Just get me out of here alive." They loaded him into a wagon commandeered from a very unhappy merchant. Harlan left him triple what it was worth. But as they prepared to leave, Anoki noticed something. "Where's Tevi?" The youngest sister was gone. In the chaos of the shooting, she'd vanished. "She was right behind me," Sana said, panic creeping into her voice. They searched quickly but found only a piece of torn fabric caught on a nail from Tevi's shirt, and in the dust outside drag marks leading to wheel tracks. "They took her," Anoki said, her voice deadly calm. "Pike's men took her during the shooting." A piece of paper was nailed to the cantina's door, one that hadn't been there before. Harlan pulled it down, read it aloud. "Trade. Brennan for the girl. Midnight Skeleton Canyon. Come alone or she dies." "Skeleton Canyon's an hour north," Coulter said. "Perfect place for an ambush. 50 men could hide in those rocks. We can't trade Brennan. Vale would need him to stop Pike legally. We can't let them keep Tevi," Sana said fiercely. Harlan's mind raced. They needed Brennan's testimony, but they needed Tevi alive. Pike had played them perfectly, dividing their forces, creating an impossible choice. "There's another way," Anoki said suddenly. "The canyon has 2 entrances. If someone could get above them—" "Suicide," Coulter said. "Those rocks are full of rattlers and loose shale. One wrong step in the dark." "Not if you know the old hunting paths." Anoki turned to Harlan. "My father showed them to me. I can get above Pike's men, but I'll need a distraction." "I'll be the distraction," Harlan said immediately. "No, you take Brennan back to the ranch. Get his testimony to Vale." Anoki's face was set, determined. "This is my sister. My responsibility." "Our responsibility," Harlan corrected. "Partners, remember." They argued for precious minutes before reaching a compromise. Harlan and Sana would create the distraction at the main entrance to Skeleton Canyon. Anoki would take the hunting paths above. Coulter surprisingly volunteered to get Brennan back to the ranch. "I've got my own score to settle with Pike," he said. "This testimony will bury him." As they prepared to split up, Brennan grabbed Harlan's sleeve. "There's something else," he wheezed. "Pike's got more than guns. He's got dynamite. Lots of it. Plans to blow the dam at Agua Fria, flood the valley. Blame it on Apache raiders. That would kill hundreds, Sana breathed. That's the point. Ultimate justification for removal. Brennan coughed specks of blood on his lips. Midnight tonight isn't just about your sister, it's when he lights the fuses. The stakes had just gotten infinitely higher. It wasn't just Tevi's life at risk now, but an entire valley of innocent people. Harlan looked at the sun already past its zenith. 6 hours until midnight. 6 hours to save Tevi, stop a massacre, and somehow survive Pike's trap. We need help, he said. Real help. Anoki nodded slowly. My uncles, they're still in the mountains. Can you reach them? Not in time unless... She pulled out a small mirror from her pack. The old signals, if they're watching. She climbed to the cantina's roof, angling the mirror to catch the sun flashing a complex pattern toward the distant mountains. Once, twice, 3 times. For long minutes, nothing. Then a flash from the peaks. Another. Message received. They'll come, Anoki said, climbing down, but I don't know if they'll make it in time. Then we'd better get moving, Harlan said. Sana, you ready for this? The middle sister checked her rifle, her face grim but determined. For Tevi, always. As they rode out of Nogales, Harlan couldn't shake the feeling that they were riding into more than just an ambush. Pike had orchestrated all of this, the false charges, the hired guns, the kidnapping. He'd been 3 steps ahead from the beginning, but Pike had made one mistake. He'd underestimated the bonds between the sisters, the loyalty of men like Coulter, who didn't like being played, and the sheer stubborn determination of a broken-down horse trainer who'd paid $35 for a ranch and gotten a war instead. The sun was already dropping toward the western mountains as they approached Skeleton Canyon. Somewhere in those twisted rocks, Tevi was being held hostage. Somewhere else, men were preparing to commit mass murder, and somewhere Harlan hoped the cavalry, literal or figurative, was coming. But hope wasn't a strategy his old sergeant used to say. Hope was what you had when your strategy went to hell. And as the canyon's mouth opened before them, like a gateway to the underworld, Harlan had the sinking feeling they were about to need all the hope they could get. The entrance to Skeleton Canyon loomed before them like the mouth of some ancient beast, all shadows and jagged stone teeth. Harlan pulled his horse to a stop, studying the terrain with the tactical eye his cavalry training had beaten into him. The canyon walls rose 200 feet on either side, bare rock face with occasional ledges and outcroppings where a man with a rifle could turn the narrow passage into a killing field. Anoki should be in position by now, Sana said quietly beside him, her voice tight with worry for both her sisters. Harlan pulled out his pocket watch. 11:15, 45 minutes until the midnight deadline, and they still had to navigate a canyon that could hide 50 gunmen in its twisted depths. Remember the plan, he said. We go in loud, draw their attention, make them think we're trying to force our way through. While Anoki gets above them, Sana checked her rifle for the 10th time. What if they've already spotted her? Then we'll hear gunfire from up there instead of down here. Harlan tried to sound more confident than he felt. The hunting paths Anoki had described sounded more like goat tracks, barely wide enough for a person, let alone someone trying to move quietly with a rifle. A sound made them both freeze, the distinctive click of a hammer being pulled back, but it came from behind them, not from the canyon. Easy there, friends. The voice was familiar, and Harlan turned slowly to see Marshal Vale emerging from behind a boulder, followed by Doc Rosamond and 3 other riders. Marshal, what are you doing here? Coulter reached us an hour ago with Brennan, told us everything. Vale's face was grim in the moonlight. I've sent riders to Agua Fria to evacuate, but that dam, if Pike blows it. 300 people live downstream, Doc Rosamond said. Families, children. Did Brennan say exactly where Pike planted the dynamite? Base of the dam north side, but it's guarded. Pike's got 10 men there. Vale shifted in his saddle. I was heading there with backup when we saw you. Figured you could use help more than they could. We need to split up, Harlan decided quickly. Vale, take your men to the dam, stop that explosion, and leave you two to face Pike alone. Not alone, Sana said, pointing to the ridge above the canyon. Shapes moved against the stars, fleeting almost invisible unless you knew where to look. The Apache had arrived, moving along the high ground like ghosts. Anoki's uncles, Harlan explained. They got her signal. Vale nodded slowly. All right, but Beck, be careful. Pike's not just desperate now, he's rabid. Cornered animals do unpredictable things. As Vale and his group rode off toward Agua Fria, Harlan and Sana turned back to the canyon. The entrance was perhaps 30 feet wide, narrowing as it went deeper. The moonlight didn't penetrate far past the opening, leaving most of the passage in darkness. Stay close, Harlan told Sana. And if shooting starts, find cover first, shoot second. They entered the canyon at a walk, their horses' hooves echoing off the stone walls. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the confined space, bouncing back and forth until it sounded like a whole cavalry troop was advancing. 50 yards in the canyon took a sharp turn to the left. Harlan stopped listening. Somewhere ahead, he could hear voices, low, tense. Pike's men were waiting. Mr. Beck, Pike's voice suddenly boomed through the canyon, amplified by the natural acoustics. So predictable. Did you really think I wouldn't expect this? I brought Brennan. Harlan called back, playing along. Just like you wanted. Show yourself then. Come around that bend, nice and slow. Harlan exchanged glances with Sana. This was it, the moment they'd either spring the trap or become caught in it. They rounded the bend to find a sight that made Harlan's blood run cold. The canyon widened here into a natural amphitheater, and Pike had turned it into a fortress. Men with rifles lined both walls, at least 20 of them, all aimed at the canyon floor. In the center, tied to a post like some offering to an ancient god, was Tavy. The youngest sister was bloodied but conscious, her eyes finding them in the darkness and widening with a mixture of hope and fear. Pike himself stood next to her, immaculate, despite the setting, a revolver pressed against Tevy's temple. "Where's Brennan?" he demanded. "Safe," Harlan replied. "Let the girl go and I'll tell you where." Pike laughed, an ugly sound that echoed off the rocks. "You think you have leverage here? Look around Beck. One word from me and you're torn to pieces." "And one word from me," Harlan said calmly, "and your dam becomes history." Pike's composure cracked slightly. "What are you talking about?" "Marshal Vale. He's at Agua Fria right now with a dozen men. Your dynamite plot. It's over, Pike." For a moment, Pike's face went pale in the moonlight. Then his composure returned, and with it, a smile that made Harlan's skin crawl. "You're lying." "Am I? You want to bet 300 innocent lives on that." The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Harlan could feel the rifles trained on him, could sense Sana coiled beside him like a spring ready to release. Somewhere above, he hoped Anoki was in position. Then Pike did something unexpected. He laughed again, but this time with genuine amusement. "Oh, Beck, you still don't understand, do you?" The dam was never the real target. A chill ran down Harlan's spine. What? The dam was misdirection, a way to draw off the federal marshals, the soldiers, anyone who might interfere. Pike's smile widened. The real target is the reservation itself. Right now, as we speak, 50 men are riding toward San Carlos with torches and guns. By dawn, it'll be ashes, and every Apache there will be dead or scattered. Sana made a sound like a wounded animal. "No." "Oh, yes. And the beautiful part, everyone will blame Geronimo's renegades. The army will hunt down every Apache in the territory, reservation or not." Pike pressed the gun harder against Tavy's temple. "Your people will be extinct within a year." The revelation hit Harlan like a physical blow. They'd been played from the very beginning. Every move, every countermove had been leading to this moment when all the defenders would be drawn away from the real target. "You're a monster," Sana whispered. "I'm a visionary," Pike corrected. "This territory will be transformed into the Garden of America. Farm, city, civilization, all built on the water your father so carefully mapped. The Apache are simply in the way." A sound from above made everyone look up. A single rock had fallen, bouncing down the canyon wall, then another. "Your Apache friends, I assume," Pike said casually. "Yes, I knew they were coming. Did you think I wouldn't have scouts watching?" He raised his voice. "Gentlemen, if you would." Gunfire erupted from positions even higher on the canyon walls. Pike had men stationed above the Apache. Harlan saw shapes falling, heard cries of pain echoing through the night. "No!" Sana started forward, but Harlan caught her arm. "Wait!" he whispered urgently. Something was wrong. The cries sounded staged. The falling bodies moved too dramatically. His suspicion was confirmed a moment later when the dead Apache suddenly rolled behind cover and returned fire. The hunters had become the hunted Pike's men caught between the Apache above and their supposed victims below, but Pike still had Tavy, and his gun never wavered from her head. "Enough!" he shouted, and the gunfire gradually died. "Everyone stop shooting or the girl dies." The sudden silence was deafening. Harlan could hear his own heartbeat, could hear Sana's ragged breathing beside him. "Here's what's going to happen," Pike said, his voice carrying clearly in the amphitheater. "Beck, you and the Apache woman will throw down your weapons. My men will tie you up. Then we'll wait here together for news from San Carlos. I want you to live long enough to know your failure." "Counteroffer," a new voice said from the darkness. Jack Coulter stepped into the moonlight, and he wasn't alone. Behind him were his men, the entire Coulter gang, armed and spread out in tactical positions. "Coulter," Pike snarled, "I paid you to do a job, yeah, but you also tried to have me killed. That voids our contract." Coulter's hand rested on his pistol. "Besides, Brennan told us everything, including where you keep your real money. That safe in your Phoenix office already cracked. Your accounts in San Francisco frozen by federal order. You're broke, Pike. You're lying." Marshal Vale moves fast when properly motivated, and Brennan's testimony very motivating. Coulter smiled coldly. "So here's my offer. You let the girl go, surrender peaceful-like, and you get to live long enough to hang legal. Or what?" Pike's voice had risen to nearly a scream. "I've got 30 men here. You had 30 men, but money only buys loyalty as long as it keeps flowing." Coulter raised his voice. "Boys up on the walls, Pike's broke. No more paydays. Anyone who throws down their guns right now can walk away free." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Harlan heard the clatter of a rifle hitting stone, then another and another. Within 30 seconds, most of Pike's hired guns had abandoned their positions. Pike stood alone except for 3 or 4 loyalists, his gun still pressed to Tevy's head, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. "It doesn't matter," he said, his voice breaking. "San Carlos still burns. The Apache are still finished." "About that," Marshal Vale's voice echoed through the canyon as he appeared at the entrance with his men. "We intercepted your raiders 5 miles from the reservation. Most surrendered when they saw federal badges. The rest, well, they won't be raiding anything ever again." Pike's hand was shaking now, the gun wavering against Tavy's temple. Harlan could see him breaking down, could see the moment when desperate calculation turned to nihilistic rage. "Then everyone dies," Pike screamed, and Harlan saw his finger tighten on the trigger. The shot was impossibly loud in the confined space, echoing and re-echoing until it sounded like thunder. But it wasn't Pike's gun that had fired. Anoki stood on a ledge 30 feet up, her rifle still smoking. Pike looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, his gun falling from nerveless fingers. He tried to speak, but only blood came out. Then he toppled backward, his body hitting the canyon floor with a sound that echoed like a judge's gavel. Tavy collapsed, sobbing, and Sana ran to her, cutting her bonds with shaking hands. The two sisters embraced, both crying, both laughing, the release of tension almost violent in its intensity. Harlan looked up at Anoki, still standing on her ledge, like some avenging angel. Their eyes met across the distance, and she nodded once, a warrior's acknowledgement between equals. "It's over," Vale said quietly beside him, but even as Harlan nodded agreement, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. One of Pike's loyalists, wounded and forgotten in the shadows, was raising a rifle toward the ledge where Anoki stood. "No!" Harlan drew and fired in one motion, months of practice compressed into a single moment of lethal precision. The gunman spun and fell his shot, going wild, striking sparks from the canyon wall. But those sparks fell onto something that shouldn't have been there, a line of black powder running along the base of the wall. "Everybody out!" Coulter shouted, recognizing the danger at the same instant as Harlan. "He's mined the canyon." The powder trail caught racing along the wall like a snake made of fire. Harlan grabbed Sana and Tavi, practically throwing them onto his horse as men scattered in all directions. Above, the Apache were already moving, their knowledge of the terrain giving them precious seconds advantage. The first explosion came from deep in the canyon, a rumbling boom that shook dust from the walls. Then another closer. The charges had been placed to bring down the canyon walls, to bury everyone inside under tons of rock. Harlan spurred his horse toward the entrance, Sana holding Tavi in front of her on her own mount. Behind them, the canyon was coming apart, massive slabs of rock shearing off and crashing down. The thunder was deafening, the dust blinding. A boulder the size of a wagon crashed down just behind them, so close Harlan felt the wind of its passage. His horse screamed and leaped forward, needing no encouragement to run. Through the chaos and dust, he could see the canyon entrance ahead, so close, but the walls were coming down faster than they could ride. Then strong hands grabbed his horse's bridle, pulling them forward. Apache warriors had formed a chain, pulling riders to safety, even as the mountain collapsed behind them. Harlan saw Anoki among them, having somehow made it down from her ledge, her face streaked with dust and blood from a dozen small cuts. They burst from the canyon mouth as the final charges detonated. The entire structure collapsed with a roar that seemed to go on forever, sealing the passage completely under hundreds of tons of rock. Where Skeleton Canyon had been, there was now only a massive wall of rubble. In the sudden silence that followed, Harlan could hear nothing but the ringing in his ears and his own labored breathing. Around him, men picked themselves up from the ground, checking for injuries, checking for friends. "Tavi," Anoki's voice cut through the dust. "Here," came the weak reply. "I'm here." The three sisters found each other in the chaos, embracing fiercely. Harlan watched them, something loosening in his chest. They'd survived. Somehow, impossibly, they'd all survived. "Beck." Vale appeared, dust turning his dark coat gray. "We've got a problem. Besides nearly being buried alive. Pike's dead, but his conspiracy isn't. There are still documents, legal claims. The lawyers in Phoenix will continue the case." "Not without evidence," Coulter interrupted, leading his horse over. "See, funny thing about lawyers, they need documentation to make their claims, and all of Pike's documents were in his office safe. The one you cracked, the one I burned, after taking the money, of course." Coulter grinned. "What man's got to make a living?" "That's destruction of evidence," Vale said sternly. "Prove it, Marshal. Besides, I think you've got bigger concerns." Coulter pointed to the east, where the sky was beginning to lighten. "Come, Dawn, you're going to have to explain why a prominent citizen and territorial commissioner is dead, why a canyon got blown up, and why there are Apache warriors standing over the whole mess." Vale looked at the assembled group, Apache outlaws, townspeople, and one stubborn horse trainer who'd started all this by refusing to let 3 young women die. "I'll tell them the truth," he said finally, "that a conspiracy to commit genocide was stopped by the very people it targeted, that courage comes in many forms from many sources, and that justice, real justice, sometimes happens outside a courtroom." Pretty words, one of the Apache warriors said. Harlan recognized him as Anoki's uncle. But pretty words don't stop the army from coming. No, Vale agreed, but they might make them pause. And combined with Brennan's testimony about the false charges, the attempted massacre at San Carlos, the plan to blow the dam, even General Morrison will have to investigate before acting. And in that time, Anoki said, stepping forward, "We disappear." Harlan turned to her sharply. "What? My people? We go back to the mountains, the hidden places, wait for this to calm. What about the ranch, our partnership?" Anoki met his eyes, and he saw sadness there. "That was a dream, Harlan Beck. A good dream, but dreams end with dawn." "No." The word came out harder than he intended. "No, you don't get to just give up. We fought for this. People died for this. And more will die if we stay. The army, the government, they'll never stop coming. Not for Apache who dared to fight back." "Then we make them stop," Harlan said. "Vale, you've got federal authority. Can you protect them? Temporarily." "But Beck, she's right. The sentiment against the Apache, it's too strong. Even with Pike gone, there will be others." "Then we change the sentiment." Harlan looked around the assembled group. "We've got witnesses here, white witnesses who saw Apache warriors risk their lives to save innocent people. We've got Doc Rosamond, who's respected throughout the territory. We've got Coulter, who's famous enough that newspapers would print his story." "What are you suggesting?" Vale asked. "A different kind of fight, not with guns, but with words, with truth." Harlan turned to Anoki. "Your father's map, the water sources. What if instead of being stolen or hidden, they were shared under Apache control, but benefiting everyone?" "You want us to trust the same people who tried to hang us?" Sana asked bitterly. "I want you to be smarter than them. Water is power in this territory. If the Apache control the water legally with federal recognition, you become indispensable instead of expendable." Anoki's uncle stepped forward. "You would have us make deals with our enemies." "I'd have you survive," Harlan said bluntly, "and more than survive, thrive. The old ways of fighting are killing your people. Maybe it's time for a new way." The silence stretched as the Apache warriors conferred quietly among themselves. Finally, Anoki's uncle spoke. "We will consider this. But first, the sisters must be cleared of all charges." "Already done," Vale said. "Brennan's testimony makes that certain." "And the ranch," Anoki asked Harlan, "is still ours. Equal partners, remember." Harlan managed a tired smile. "Though we might need to hire some hands to help with the work. I might know some boys looking for honest employment," Coulter offered, "assuming the pay's good. A reformed outlaw hiring reformed outlaws to work a ranch with Apache partners." Vale shook his head. "This territory gets stranger every day." As the sun rose, fully painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, the various groups began to disperse. The Apache warriors melted back into the mountains, but not before Anoki's uncle clasped Harlan's hand. "You saved my nieces," he said simply. "This makes you family. The water knowledge, we will share it as you suggested. But if betrayal comes—" "It won't," Harlan promised. "Not from me." The ride back to Dry Laurel Ranch was slow, exhausted. Tavi rode with Anoki still weak from her ordeal. Sana stayed close to both of them, as if afraid they might disappear if she looked away. As they crested the last ridge before the ranch, Harlan pulled up short. The yard was full of townspeople from the nearby settlements, all armed, all waiting. "Beck," old Mateo called out. "We heard the explosions, came to help." "You're about 8 hours late," Harlan said, but he was smiling. "Better late than never," Doc Rosamond said. She immediately went to Tavi, checking her injuries with professional efficiency. "This one needs rest and care." "They all do," Harlan said, looking at the three sisters. As the crowd dispersed, helping to clean up the damage from the previous battle, Harlan found himself alone on the porch with Anoki. The morning sun was warm on their faces, and for a moment neither spoke. "You really think this can work?" she asked finally. "Apache and whites sharing water, sharing land." "I think we have to try," Harlan said. "The alternative is too bloody to contemplate. My father would have liked your optimism, but not my realism." Anoki smiled slightly. "He was a dreamer too. It's what got him killed. But his dream, the map, the water, it survived. In you and your sisters. Fragments, pieces like us. Pieces that make a whole when brought together," Harlan pointed out. "Maybe that's the lesson. Maybe none of us are meant to stand alone." Before Anoki could respond, Coulter rode up his men behind him. "Well, Beck, it's been interesting," he said, tipping his hat, "but we've got places to be, things to steal." "I thought you were going reformed," Harlan said. "I am, starting tomorrow." Coulter grinned. "Or maybe next week." He grew more serious. "Watch yourself. Pike had friends, and they won't forget this." "Let them come," Harlan said. After Coulter left, Vale approached with a leather portfolio. "Official paperwork," he said. "The sisters are cleared of all charges. The ranch is confirmed as legally yours." And he pulled out another document. "This is a federal water rights claim. If the sisters share their father's knowledge, they'll have legal control over those water sources." "Fancy papers," Anoki said, taking the documents. "Will they mean anything when the next Pike comes along?" "They'll mean you have legal standing to fight back," Vale said. "It's not much, but it's a start." As the sun climbed higher, the ranch slowly returned to something resembling normal. The barn would need to be rebuilt, the fences repaired, the well redug, but those were problems for tomorrow. For now, Harlan stood on his porch, their porch, and watched as Sana taught some of the town children to track rabbits, as Tevi sketched plans for a new irrigation system, despite Doc Rosamond's insistence that she rest, as Anoki stood with her uncles planning how to share the water knowledge while protecting their people's interests. $35. That's what he'd paid for this land. Looking at it now, at the people it had brought together, the bonds it had forged, the future it might enable, he knew he'd gotten the bargain of a lifetime. But every bargain has a price, and as Harlan watched dust rising on the eastern horizon, riders too many to count, he knew the bill was coming due. The army was coming just as Vale had predicted. The real battle for Dry Laurel Ranch was just beginning. The dust cloud resolved into a full cavalry column, 50 men in Union blue riding in perfect formation, their brass buttons and rifle barrels glinting in the morning sun. At their head rode a man Harlan recognized from his own service days, Colonel Marcus Wells, a by-the-book officer who'd earned his reputation putting down Apache resistance in the Tonto Basin campaigns. "Everyone stay calm," Harlan said quietly, though he could feel the tension rippling through the ranch like a physical thing. The Apache warriors had already melted away into the landscape at the first sight of the soldiers, but Anoki and her sisters remained standing on the porch, with their chins raised in defiance. Wells raised his hand and the column halted with military precision 30 yards from the house. He rode forward alone, his bearing stiff and formal. "Mr. Beck," he said, not dismounting. "I'm here on official military business." "Colonel Wells," Harlan replied evenly. "Coffee's on if you'd care to be civilized about this." Wells's mustache twitched, might have been amusement, might have been annoyance. "This isn't a social call. I've received reports of Apache raids, massacres, and general uprising in this area." "Reports from who?" Vale stepped forward, that his federal marshal's badge prominent. "Because the only massacre attempted here was by white men against Apache women and innocent settlers." Wells finally looked at Vale, taking in the badge. "Marshal Vale, I'd heard you were involved in this mess. My reports come from the territorial governor himself. He says Apache warriors attacked American citizens, destroyed property, and killed a territorial commissioner. Gideon Pike was killed while attempting to commit mass murder," Vale said firmly. "I have witnesses and evidence." "Evidence that I'll need to review," Wells said. He dismounted then, a calculated move to show he was willing to talk, but ready to act. In the meantime, any Apache not on the reservation are to be considered hostile. These women are legal residents of this ranch, Harlan said, indicating the sisters. They're my business partners, and they've been cleared of all charges by federal authority. Wells studied the sisters with the calculating gaze of a man who'd spent years fighting their people. Apache women off the reservation without military escort. That alone is violation of territorial law. Federal law supersedes territorial, Vale interjected, and federal law says these women are free citizens. That's debatable. Wells pulled out a document from his jacket. Orders from General Morrison. All Apache in this region are to be relocated to San Carlos immediately for their own protection. Protection from what? Anoki asked, speaking for the first time. Wells looked at her with surprise, as if he hadn't expected her to speak English. From the vigilante justice that's surely coming, miss. Pike had many friends. Word of his death is spreading, and the story being told isn't the one Marshal Vale just gave me. Before anyone could respond, a commotion arose from the cavalry column. Soldiers were pointing at the ridgeline where Apache warriors had appeared, not threatening, just standing watching. Harlan counted at least 30, probably more, hidden. "Hold fire!" Wells barked as several soldiers reached for their rifles. He turned back to Harlan, his face hard. "You want to explain why there are hostile Apache surrounding us?" "They're not hostile," Harlan said. "They're protective. Those are the girl's uncle's cousin's family. They came when their kin were threatened. Armed Apache off the reservation is an act of war. Armed Apache defending their families from lynching is an act of survival," Anoki said sharply. "Or don't we have that right?" Wells studied her for a long moment. "You're the one who speaks for them. I speak for myself and my sisters. My uncles speak for themselves. And then perhaps you should tell your uncles that if they don't return to the reservation immediately, I'll be forced to engage." "Forced?" Harlan stepped between Wells and Anoki. "Colonel, nobody's forcing anything here. We're all reasonable people trying to avoid bloodshed." "Are we?" Wells gestured to the burned barn, the bullet holes in the house walls. "Because it looks like bloodshed has already happened." A rider approached from the east, moving fast. As he got closer, Harlan recognized him as one of Vale's deputies. "Marshal," the deputy called, not even dismounting properly before delivering his news. "Trouble in Tucson. Judge Brennan's been shot." "What?" Vale grabbed the deputy's arm. "When? How?" "Last night. Someone broke into his home. He's alive, but barely. And Marshal, they took all the documents from the Pike case. Everything's gone." Harlan felt the ground shift under his feet. Without Brennan's testimony and the documented evidence, they had nothing to prove Pike's conspiracy. Wells's expression had turned grimmer. "This changes things. Without evidence of Pike's crimes, his death looks like murder, and these women were involved, weren't they?" "They were victims," Vale protested. "So you say, but with the judge shot and the evidence gone." Wells shrugged. "I have my orders. The Apache come with me." "Over my dead body," Harlan said quietly. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Several soldiers shifted hands, moving to weapons. On the ridgeline, the Apache warriors had moved closer, their intentions clear. "That can be arranged," Wells said coldly. "Colonel," a new voice interrupted. Doc Rosamond walked out of the house, and with her was Tom Brennan himself, bandaged and pale but very much alive. Wells's eyes widened. "Who is this? The man who can prove everything," Vale said quickly. "Tom Brennan, former employee of Gideon Pike, willing to testify to the entire conspiracy." "I thought he was taken to Tucson," Wells said suspiciously. "I kept him here," Doc Rosamond said calmly. "His wounds were too severe to travel. Lucky thing considering what happened to the judge." Brennan stepped forward unsteadily. "Colonel, I used to ride with Pike's outfit. I can tell you everything, the fake murder charges against these women, the plan to blow the dam, the attempt to massacre the reservation. I was part of it all, God help me." Wells looked skeptical. "Why should I believe a confessed criminal? Because I've got proof." Brennan pulled a small leather book from his shirt. Pike's personal journal, names, dates, payments, everything. "How did you—" "Took it from his office before I ran to Mexico. Insurance in case he tried to have me killed," which he did. Wells took the journal, flipped through it. His expression grew increasingly troubled as he read. "This implicates half the territorial government," he said slowly. "Yes, sir, it does," Brennan confirmed. Pike wasn't working alone. He had backing from Washington, from the railroad companies, from— A shot rang out, cutting Brennan off mid-sentence. He looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest. Surprise on his face, then toppled forward. "Sniper!" Harlan yelled, diving for cover as more shots cracked through the air. The cavalry scattered soldiers taking defensive positions. On the ridgeline, the Apache had vanished like smoke, but Harlan knew they were moving, hunting the shooter. Vale was crouched over Brennan, trying to stop the bleeding, but Harlan could see it was too late. The man's eyes were already glazing over. "The journal!" Brennan gasped, blood frothing on his lips. "There's more copies." "Where?" Vale demanded. But Brennan was gone, his last secret dying with him. Wells had taken cover behind a water trough, still holding Pike's journal. "This shooter, one of Pike's men, has to be," Harlan said, scanning the surrounding terrain. "Someone cleaning up loose ends." Another shot sparked off the trough, inches from Wells's head. The shooter was good professional. "Sir," one of Wells's lieutenants called. "Movement on the North Ridge. Looks like more Apache." But it wasn't Apache. Harlan recognized the riding formation even at distance. Coulter's gang coming fast. "That's Coulter," he told Wells. "He's on our side. Jack Coulter, the outlaw. Reformed outlaw, mostly." Wells looked like he was reconsidering every life choice that had brought him to this moment. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had started. A few minutes later, one of Anoki's uncles appeared on the South Ridge, holding up a rifle not his own. Harlan realized but the sniper's weapon. "We found him," the warrior called down. "Dead now. White man, fancy clothes, had this." He tossed something down that landed near Wells, a leather wallet. The colonel picked it up, examined its contents. "Treasury Department identification," he said slowly. "Agent Michael Thornton, fishery." Vale stood up from Brennan's body. "What's Treasury doing out here? Protecting their investments, apparently," Wells said grimly. "If Pike's journal is accurate, there are government contracts worth millions tied to this land grab." Coulter and his men rode into the yard, weapons out, but not quite pointed at the soldiers. "Heard shooting," Coulter said casually. "Thought you might need help." "We found 3 more riders heading this way," one of his men added. "Convinced them to head elsewhere." "Convinced?" Vale asked, persuasively. Wells stood up slowly, still holding Pike's journal. The situation had spiraled far beyond his simple orders to relocate Apache to the reservation. "I need to telegraph General Morrison," he said finally. "This situation, it's not what we were told." "None of it is," Harlan said. "Colonel, these women aren't criminals or hostiles. They're victims of a conspiracy that goes all the way to Washington. You send them to the reservation now, they'll be dead within a week. Too many people want them silenced." Wells looked at the sisters at Vale, at the armed men surrounding his position. Soldiers, outlaws, Apache townspeople, an impossible alliance that shouldn't exist. "My orders are clear," he said slowly. "All Apache to be relocated." "Then change the orders," Anoki said, stepping forward. "You've seen the truth. You hold the proof in your hands. Will you be the army that protects the innocent or the army that enables murderers? You're asking me to disobey direct orders." "I'm asking you to think," Anoki said fiercely, "to see us as people, not problems to be solved." A long silence stretched across the yard. Harlan could feel the tension building again, everyone waiting to see which way Wells would jump. Then something unexpected happened. One of Wells's soldiers, a young sergeant, spoke up. "Sir, permission to speak." Wells looked surprised but nodded. "Sir, I was at Sibicu Creek, saw what happened when we forced relocation on peaceful Apache. Women and children died, sir, for nothing but land someone else wanted." The sergeant looked directly at the sisters. "These folks ain't causing trouble. Seems to me the trouble's being caused to them." Other soldiers were nodding, murmuring agreement. Wells looked at his men, then at Pike's journal, then at the assembled defenders of Dry Laurel Ranch. "I'll need sworn statements," he said finally, "from everyone. Every detail of Pike's conspiracy, every crime committed, every official involved." "You'll have them," Vale promised. "And these Apache warriors on the ridges, they need to disperse. I can't explain armed Indians to my superiors." Anoki called out in Apache to her uncles. There was a brief exchange, then the warriors began to withdraw, though Harlan suspected they wouldn't go far. "One more thing," Wells said. "This ranch needs to be under federal protection until this matter is resolved. I'm posting a squad here." "To protect us or guard us?" Harlan asked. "Both, if I'm being honest. There are too many interests at play here, too many people who want you all dead or disappeared." Wells turned to his lieutenant. "Set up a perimeter. Nobody comes or goes without my permission." As the soldiers moved to follow orders, Wells approached Harlan privately. "You know this isn't over," he said quietly. "Pike's journal implicates powerful people. They won't let this stand." "Then we'd better move fast," Harlan replied. "Get the truth out before they can bury it." "The truth?" Wells smiled grimly. "In my experience, the truth is whatever the men with the most guns say it is." "Then it's good we've got some guns of our own." Wells looked around at the unlikely collection of defenders. "You really think you can change things the way the territory treats the Apache?" "I think we have to try," Harlan said. "The alternative is too much blood on both sides." Before Wells could respond, Doc Rosamond called out urgently from the house. "TV's collapsed. I need help." Everyone rushed toward the house. The youngest sister was on the floor, convulsing foam at her mouth. "Poison," Doc Rosamond said grimly. "Someone poisoned her." "When how?" Anoki demanded, cradling her sister's head. "The water," Sana said suddenly. "She was the only one who drank from the well this morning." Harlan ran to the well, hauled up the bucket, smelled it. A bitter almond-scent cyanide. "Someone poisoned our well," he said, fury building in his chest. "Not someone," Vale said, examining tracks near the well. "Several someones. Boot prints, maybe 4 men. Recent, probably last night during the chaos." Doc Rosamond was working frantically over TV, forcing charcoal water down her throat, trying to counter the poison. The girl's breathing was labored, her skin turning blue. "Will she live?" Anoki asked, her voice breaking. "I don't know," Doc Rosamond admitted. "The dose was heavy. If we can't purge it fast enough." Harlan felt rage building in his chest. Even with Pike dead, his reach extended from beyond the grave. How many more assassins were out there? How many more attempts would there be? "That's it," he said suddenly. "We're done playing defense." Everyone looked at him. "What do you mean?" Vale asked. "I mean we take this fight to them. Pike's journal names names right. Then we visit those names. We make them understand that targeting us comes with a price." "That's vigilante justice," Wells said sternly. "No, it's survival. They poisoned our well colonel. Tried to kill a teenage girl whose only crime was being born Apache. How long do we wait for proper channels while they pick us off one by one?" "He's right," Coulter said. "In my experience, the only thing men like Pike's associates understand is fear. Make them afraid to come after you and they'll find easier targets. Or they'll come harder," Wells countered, shammered. "Then we hit them first." Anoki said, her voice cold as winter wind. "My father tried to work within the white man's law. They killed him anyway. Maybe it's time we reminded them that the Apache know how to fight." The room went silent at the implications of her words. War, real war between Apache and whites, would tear the territory apart. "There's another way," a weak voice said. Everyone turned to see Tevi, eyes open, despite her labored breathing. "The map," she whispered. "Father's map. Use it." "What do you mean?" Anoki asked. "Don't fight them. Buy them." Tevi coughed specks of blood on her lips. "The water rights. Sell shares. Make them need us alive." It was brilliant in its simplicity. If the powerful men who wanted them dead suddenly had financial stakes in the water resources the sisters controlled, killing them would cost money. And if there was one thing Harlan had learned about powerful men, it was that they valued money over everything else. "It could work," Vale said slowly. "Set up a legal corporation. The sisters maintain controlling interest but sell minority shares to investors. Pike's allies would have to choose continue the vendetta and lose access to water or buy in and get rich." "Dealing with devils," Anoki said bitterly. "Using their greed against them," Harlan corrected. "It's not ideal, but it keeps you alive." Wells had been listening thoughtfully. "I could facilitate this. Military contracts for water rights would legitimize the entire operation, make it official government business." "You'd do that?" Anoki asked suspiciously. "I'm a soldier, miss. My job is to keep the peace. If this prevents a war, then yes, I'll do it." Over the next hours, as Doc Rosamond fought to save Tevi's life, they hammered out the details. Vale would draw up the legal papers. Wells would provide military protection and endorsement. The sisters would map out specific water sources, not all of them, but enough to make the venture profitable. But even as they planned, Harlan couldn't shake the feeling they were missing something. Pike had been too prepared, too thorough. There had to be more to his plan than they'd discovered. His answer came near sunset when one of Wells's scouts rode in hard. "Colonel Ryder's coming, hundreds of them." Wells grabbed his field glasses, studied the approaching dust cloud. His face went pale. "That's not a posse," he said. "That's an army." Through the glasses, Harlan could see them, men in civilian clothes, but moving in military formation. At their head rode a figure he recognized from newspaper sketches, Senator James Aldrich, the man who'd pushed for Apache removal in Washington. "Aldrich is here," Vale said in disbelief. "He hasn't set foot in the territory in 5 years." "He has now," Wells said grimly, "and he's brought a private militia." They watched as the force, at least 200 men, took positions surrounding the ranch. They were outside rifle range, but close enough to prevent escape. A single rider broke off, approaching under a white flag. He stopped just within shouting distance. "Colonel Wells," he called. "Senator Aldrich requests your presence for a discussion of the current situation." Wells looked at Harlan. "This is beyond my authority now. A senator outranks a colonel." "Then we're finished?" Anoki asked. "Not yet," Wells said. He turned to the messenger. "Tell the senator I'll meet with him here at the ranch. He can bring 5 men, no more." The messenger rode back and they waited. 20 minutes later, Aldrich himself rode up with his escort. He was a distinguished-looking man in his 60s with silver hair and the bearing of someone used to absolute authority. "Colonel Wells," he said, not dismounting, "I'm disappointed to find you fraternizing with enemies of the state." "I'm investigating a complex situation, Senator." "Nothing complex about it. These Apache murdered a territorial commissioner. They're to be arrested immediately." "With respect, Senator, I have evidence that Commissioner Pike was engaged in criminal conspiracy." "Evidence from whom? Outlaws and savages." Aldrich's voice dripped contempt. "Colonel, you're relieved of command. Major Thompson," one of Aldrich's escorts, stepped forward. "Sir, you're now in command of the federal forces here. Your orders are to arrest these criminals and escort them to Fort Grant for trial." "You can't do that," Vale protested. "I'm a federal marshal and these people are under my protection." Aldrich pulled out a document. "Presidential Order Marshal. Martial law has been declared in this region. Your authority is suspended." The bottom dropped out of Harlan's stomach. They'd been outmaneuvered completely. But then TV, barely conscious and supported by her sisters, spoke up. "Senator Aldrich," she said weakly, "before you arrest us, you should know something." "I don't speak with savages," Aldrich said coldly. "Then you'll never find the gold." Everyone froze. Aldrich's eyes narrowed. "What gold?" "The gold my father found." TV continued, her voice growing stronger. "When he was mapping water sources, a vein bigger than anything found in Tombstone. He marked it on his maps, the parts only we know." It was a lie, Harlan knew, but it was a brilliant lie. Aldrich's greed was visible on his face, warring with his hatred. "You're lying." "Am I? Why do you think Pike wanted us alive so badly? It wasn't just water he was after." Aldrich dismounted, slowly approached the porch where the sisters stood. "If this gold exists, it belongs to the government." "It belongs to whoever can find it," Anoki said, picking up her sister's gambit. "And only we can find it. We could make you tell us." "You could try," Anoki said calmly. "But my father taught us well. Each of us knows only part of the location. Kill one of us, torture us, separate us, and the gold stays hidden forever." Aldrich's jaw worked as he processed this. Harlan could see him calculating the political gain from removing the Apache versus the potential wealth from the gold. "Prove it," he said finally. "Show me something that proves this gold exists." The sisters exchanged glances. Then Sana reached into her shirt and pulled out a small leather pouch. She poured its contents into her hand, 3 gold nuggets, each the size of a thumb. "The only samples my father brought back," she said. "Test them. You'll find they're purer than anything from the established mines." Aldrich took one of the nuggets, bit it, examined it closely. His breathing quickened. "Where?" he demanded. "Make a deal first," Harlan said, stepping forward. "Official pardon for the sisters. Recognition of their water rights. Protection from prosecution. In exchange, they'll share the location with a partnership that includes you." "You're hardly in a position to negotiate." "Neither are you," Harlan pointed out. "You could arrest us all, maybe even torture the location out of them, but these girls are tough. By the time you broke them, if you could would get out. Every prospector in the territory would be searching. You'd have competition claims, disputes, legal challenges, or—" He paused. "You could be a legal partner in the richest gold find in Arizona history." The silence stretched taut as Aldrich considered. Around them, soldiers and militiamen waited, weapons ready, everyone balanced on the edge of violence. Finally, Aldrich smiled, a cold, calculating expression. "You've got spine, Beck. I'll give you that." He turned to Wells. "Colonel, you'll witness this agreement. The Apache women are pardoned for all alleged crimes. In exchange, they'll reveal the location of this gold deposit to a partnership consisting of myself, them, and whoever else they choose to include." "I'll need that in writing," Vale said. "Of course." Aldrich gestured to one of his men, who produced paper and pen. As they drafted the agreement, Harlan caught Anoki's eye. She gave him the tiniest nod. They'd bought time, nothing more. The gold story wouldn't hold up to scrutiny, but by the time Aldrich figured that out, they'd hopefully have other protections in place. The sun was setting as Aldrich and his militia withdrew. The immediate crisis passed. But as Harlan stood on the porch watching them go, he knew this was just a respite. "The gold doesn't exist, does it?" Wells asked quietly beside him. "Does it matter? It kept us alive today. And tomorrow we'll find another way." Wells nodded slowly. "You know, Beck, I came here thinking you were harboring hostiles. Now I'm not sure what to think." "Think this, Colonel. Those 3 girls have been hanged, shot at, poisoned, kidnapped, and threatened with genocide, and they're still standing, still fighting. Maybe instead of trying to remove the Apache, we should be learning from them." Wells was quiet for a moment. "Perhaps you're right. God knows we've tried everything else." As darkness fell, Harlan went inside to check on Tevi. She was sleeping now, her breathing easier. Doc Rosamond had pulled her through the worst of it. "She'll live," the doctor said, though it was close. Anoki and Sana sat by their sister's bedside, keeping watch. They looked up as Harlan entered. "Thank you," Anoki said simply, "for everything." "We're partners," Harlan replied. "That's what partners do." "The gold story won't fool them for long," Sana warned. "No, but it gives us time to implement the water rights plan, make ourselves too valuable to kill." "And if that doesn't work," Harlan smiled grimly, "then we get creative again. We've gotten pretty good at it." A commotion outside drew his attention. One of Wells's soldiers was calling for him. Outside he found Jack Coulter preparing to leave with his men. "You're going?" Harlan asked. "Job's done here," Coulter said. "Pike's dead, you're alive, and I've got places to be." "What about your reformation?" Coulter grinned. "Like I said, starting tomorrow, or next week." He grew serious. "Watch your back, Beck. Aldrich isn't the type to forget being made a fool of. When he figures out there's no gold, we'll handle it. I'm sure you will." Coulter mounted his horse, then turned back. "You know I've robbed banks, stolen cattle, shot my share of men. But what you're doing here, trying to change how this whole territory thinks, that takes a kind of courage I don't have." "Or a kind of stupidity," Harlan suggested. "Maybe both." Coulter tipped his hat. "Good luck, Beck. You're going to need it." As the outlaw and his men rode off into the darkness, Harlan stood alone on his porch looking at the stars. The ranch was quiet now, but he could feel the weight of all that had happened, all that was still to come. $35. That's what he'd paid for this land. But the real price, the blood, the fear, the impossible alliances, the constant threat of death that was still being tallied. But as he heard laughter from inside the sisters sharing some joke despite everything they'd been through, he knew he'd pay it again. Some things were worth any price. The war for Dry Laurel Ranch wasn't over. It might never truly be over, but for tonight, they'd won. Tonight they were alive and together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new impossible situations to navigate. But tomorrow would also bring new opportunities, new allies, new chances to prove that Apache and white outlaw and lawman could build something together. The door opened behind him and Anoki stepped out. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much to think about." She stood beside him looking at the stars. "My grandmother used to say that each star was a warrior who died protecting their people. On nights like this, I wonder if she was right. If she was, then there are a lot of warriors watching over us. We'll need them all." She was quiet for a moment. "Harlan, what happens when they realize there's no gold?" "We'll tell them the truth, that the real gold is the water. With proper irrigation, this land could feed thousands. That's worth more than any metal." "You really believe that?" "I believe that what we're building here, this partnership, this proof that different peoples can work together, that's worth more than all the gold in Arizona." She smiled slightly. "You're either very wise or very naive." "Probably both." They stood in comfortable silence, two unlikely partners on an impossible journey, while above them the warrior stars kept their eternal watch. The morning after Aldrich's departure brought an unexpected visitor, a woman in an expensive traveling dress, her carriage bearing the emblem of the Territorial Bank. She stepped down with practiced grace, but Harlan noticed the way her eyes catalogued every detail of the ranch, every defensive position, every person present. "Mr. Beck," she said, extending a gloved hand, "I'm Catherine Pike. Gideon was my brother." The tension on the porch ratcheted up instantly. Anoki's hand moved to her rifle, but Harlan raised his own hand slightly. "Wait. Mrs. Pike," he said carefully, "this is unexpected." "I imagine it is." She looked at the sisters, her expression unreadable. "You're the ones who killed him." "He tried to kill us first," Anoki said flatly. "Yes, I know." Catherine's response surprised everyone. Gideon was always ambitious to a fault. It eventually became his undoing. "Why are you here?" Harlan asked directly. to propose a solution to all our problems. She reached into her bag, pulled out a thick folder. My brother's death leaves significant debts and obligations. The bank needs water rights to survive. You need the bank's influence to keep the government from destroying you. I suggest we help each other. You want to make a deal? Sana asked incredulously. Your brother tried to hang us. My brother was a fool who let greed cloud his judgment. I'm neither. Catherine opened the folder, revealing detailed financial documents. I'm offering to buy 30% of your water rights for $50,000. Cash. Today. The number hung in the air like a physical thing. It was more money than any of them had ever imagined. In addition, Catherine continued, the bank will provide legal representation against any future claims on your land, and I'll personally ensure that my brother's former associates understand that continuing his vendetta would be financially inadvisable. Why should we trust you? Anoki demanded. Because I'm the only thing standing between you and bankruptcy. Catherine's smile was sharp as glass. You see, my brother took out significant loans against this property before selling it. Technically, Mr. Beck bought land that was already mortgaged. I could foreclose today if I chose. Harlan felt his jaw tighten. The deed was supposed to be clear. The deed was forged. My brother was good at that. She pulled out another document. Here's the original mortgage. $30,000 due in full in 10 days. We don't have that kind of money, Harlan said. No, but you have something worth far more. Water. Catherine stood smoothing her skirts. Think about my offer. You have until sunset to decide. Accept and all debts are forgiven, all threats ended. Refuse. She shrugged elegantly. Well, I hear the reservation is lovely this time of year. After she left, the arguments began immediately. Vale thought it might be their best option. Wells, still present with his soldiers, warned that the mortgage claim could be legitimate. The sisters were divided. Anoki suspicious, Sana practical, Tivi still too weak to contribute much. It's extortion, Anoki said finally. It's business, Harlan corrected grimly. The question is whether we can afford to refuse. Before anyone could answer, one of Wells's scouts rode in hard. Colonel Apache war party approaching from the south. 50 warriors, maybe more. Wells grabbed his field glasses, studied the approaching group. That's not a war party. They're flying a white flag. As the Apache drew closer, Harlan recognized the lead rider Victorio, one of the most respected chiefs still fighting the reservation system. This could be bad, Wells muttered. But Victorio rode in peacefully, stopping just outside the ring of soldiers. He looked directly at Anoki and her sisters. I have heard of your stand, he said in accented English, of how you fought the white man's greed and survived. This gives our people hope. Chief Victorio, Anoki said respectfully, we are honored by your presence. I come with an offer, Victorio continued. Join us. Leave this place of death and broken promises. Come to the mountains where Apache can live free. For how long? Harlan asked, stepping forward. How long before the army hunts you down? Victorio looked at him with eyes that had seen too much war. Long enough to die as Apache, not as reservation slaves. There's another way, Tavi said weakly from where she sat. A path between war and surrender. What path? Victorio asked. Partnership. Use the water rights as leverage. Make ourselves necessary to their prosperity. Collaborate with our enemies. Victorio's voice was cold. Survive despite our enemies, Anoki corrected. Chief, how many of our people have died fighting? How many more will die? If we can find a way to live, to prosper, to keep our culture while adapting to their world, isn't that victory? Victorio was silent for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable. Then he turned to his warriors, spoke rapidly in Apache. A heated discussion followed with clear disagreement among the group. Finally, Victorio turned back. Some of my warriors say you speak wisdom. Others say you speak surrender. I will watch. If you succeed here, perhaps there is hope for this new path. If you fail—" He didn't need to finish the threat. As the Apache departed, Catherine Pike's carriage returned, but this time she wasn't alone. Senator Aldrich was with her, along with several other well-dressed men Harlan didn't recognize. "Mr. Beck," Aldrich said without preamble, "we need to discuss the gold." Harlan's stomach dropped. They'd figured it out already. "What about it?" he asked, keeping his voice level. "We've had experts examine the nuggets. They're real, exceptionally pure, but they're also old, weathered in a way that suggests they've been out of the ground for years." Aldrich's eyes were cold. "You lied to me." "We never said when the gold was found," Anoki said calmly, "only that our father found it." "Semantics won't save you," Aldrich snarled. "I could have you all arrested for fraud." "You could," Catherine Pike interjected smoothly, "but that would be financially foolish." Everyone turned to her. "The gold may be a fiction," she continued, "but the water is real, and water, Senator, is worth more than gold in this territory." She pulled out a map, spread it on a makeshift table. With proper development, the water sources these women control could irrigate 50,000 acres. That's enough to support a city. "What are you proposing?" one of the other men asked. "A consortium. We pool resources, develop the water infrastructure, share the profits. The Apache sisters maintain controlling interest to ensure their cooperation. We provide capital and political protection." "You want us to go into business with savages?" Aldrich asked incredulously. "I want us to make money," Catherine replied bluntly, "and they're the only ones who know where all the water is." The discussion that followed was heated, sometimes venomous, but gradually greed overcame prejudice. The men began to see the potential profits, the political advantages of civilizing the Apache through commerce rather than war. "There's one condition," Aldrich said finally. "They must agree to map all the water sources, everything, no hidden reserves." "No," Anoki said immediately. "Some sources are sacred, they stay secret." "Then there's no deal." The standoff stretched taut. Then Tivi, despite her weakness, stood up. "I'll make you a different offer," she said. "We'll map 70% of the sources. The remaining 30% stay with us unknown to you. In exchange, you guarantee in writing that no Apache will be forced from this land, that our people can access the water freely, and that any profits from the development go partly to improving conditions on the reservation." "That's absurd," Aldrich started, but Catherine cut him off. "It's brilliant. It ensures their cooperation indefinitely. They can't be eliminated because they hold critical information. We can't betray them because we need their knowledge. Mutual dependence." "Mutual survival," Harlan added. The negotiation continued as the sun tracked across the sky. Terms were argued, modified, argued again. Vale drew up legal documents. Wells witnessed them. Even Victorio, who had returned to observe, added his mark as a witness for the Apache side. By late afternoon, they had an agreement. The Dry Laurel Water Consortium was officially formed. The sisters would retain 51% ownership. Catherine Pike would hold 20%, Aldrich 15%, and the remaining 14% divided among other investors. "I still don't like it," Aldrich grumbled as he signed. "You'll like the profits," Catherine assured him. As the documents were finalized, Harlan noticed something: riders approaching from the east, not military, not Apache, townspeople, dozens of them led by Doc Rosamond and old Mateo Ortiz. "We heard what's happening," Doc Rosamond said as they arrived. "We want in." "In?" Catherine Pike asked. "The investment, the water consortium. We're pooling our money. It's not much, but we want to be part of this." "Why?" Aldrich demanded. "Because for the first time in this territory's history, Apache and whites are building something together instead of tearing each other apart," Mateo said. "We want our children to see that, to be part of that." Catherine looked at the assembled townspeople, farmers, merchants, laborers. How much can you invest? Together, maybe $3,000. That would buy you 1%. We'll take it. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, the final papers were signed. The Dry Laurel Water Consortium was official, binding Apache and White, rich and poor, in a web of mutual benefit. "This is just paper," Victorio said quietly to Anoki. "Paper can burn." "Yes," she agreed, "but water is forever, and now they need us to find it." That night, for the first time in weeks, the ranch was peaceful. No gunmen in the shadows, no immediate threats. The various parties had dispersed to spread word of the agreement to begin planning the development. Harlan stood on his porch, watching the stars emerge. The sisters sat nearby, finally able to rest without fear. "We did it," Sana said, disbelief in her voice. "We survived," Anoki corrected. "That's not the same as winning." "It's a start," Harlan said. "Your father would be proud." "He'd be suspicious," Anoki replied. "These people tried to kill us. Now they're our partners. People change when their interests change," Tevi said wisely. "Make it profitable for them to keep us alive, and they will. And when it's no longer profitable, then we'll have built enough power to protect ourselves," Harlan said. "The water rights, the legal framework, the public partnership, it all makes it harder to destroy you." A rider approached in the darkness, Marshal Vale, returning from town. "News," he said without dismounting. "General Morrison has officially called off the removal order. The Apache can stay." The sisters embraced, tears flowing freely. Even Anoki, usually so controlled, let her emotions show. "There's more," Vale continued. "The territorial governor has resigned. Seems Pike's journal implicated him in numerous crimes. There'll be new elections, and some folks are talking about nominating you, Beck." "Me?" Harlan laughed. "I'm just a horse trainer who paid too much for a ranch. You're the man who brought Apache and whites together. That makes you unique in this territory." "I didn't do it alone," Harlan said, looking at the sisters. "We did it together." The next morning brought a surprise, Jack Coulter returning with his gang. "Thought you were reforming," Harlan said. "I am. We all are." Coulter grinned. "Figured we'd start by working for the consortium. Security protection, making sure nobody tries to renege on the deal. You want to work for us, for the sisters specifically. Figure anyone tough enough to survive what they have deserves good protection." Anoki studied him. "Why, really?" Coulter's expression grew serious. "Because what you're doing here matters. It's a chance to be part of something good for once. My men and I, we've done a lot of bad in our lives. Maybe this balances the scales a bit." Over the following weeks, the transformation began. Engineers arrived to survey water sources. Construction crews started building irrigation channels. The ranch became a hub of activity. Apache and white working side by side. There were problems, of course. Some workers refused to work alongside Apache. Some Apache refused to trust white partners. But gradually the shared labor and shared purpose began to bridge the divide. Tevi, fully recovered, proved to have a genius for engineering. Her irrigation designs were revolutionary, combining Apache knowledge of the land with modern techniques. Sana became the consortium's record keeper, her perfect memory tracking every agreement, every payment, every detail. Anoki managed security, working with Coulter's men and her Apache relatives to protect the operation. And Harlan found himself at the center of it all, mediating disputes, coordinating efforts, building bridges between communities that had been at war for generations. 6 months after that first deadly night, when he'd cut 3 sisters down from hanging, Harlan stood surveying the transformed ranch. Where there had been dust, green fields now grew. Where there had been conflict, people worked together. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was, but it was working. $35, Anoki said, joining him. "That's what you paid for all this trouble." "Best investment I ever made," Harlan replied. "Even with everything that happened, The violence, the fear, the constant threat, especially because of that. It brought us together, made us partners. Anoki smiled a real smile that transformed her face. Partners. A commotion in the yard drew their attention. A delegation was arriving, officials from Washington come to see the miracle of Dry Laurel Ranch, where Apache and White were building prosperity together. Ready for this? Harlan asked. We've faced worse, Anoki replied. As they walked down to meet the delegation, Harlan reflected on the journey. From that moment of finding 3 women hanging in his barn to this, a thriving partnership that was reshaping the territory's future. The delegation was impressed. They toured the irrigation works, met the Apache, and white workers laboring together saw the green fields emerging from the desert. The leader, a secretary from the Interior Department, pulled Harlan aside. This could be a model for the entire West, he said. Peaceful integration through commerce rather than conflict. It only works because everyone benefits, Harlan explained. Take away the mutual profit and the old hatreds return. Then we must ensure the profits continue, the secretary said. The government is prepared to purchase water rights for military installations, a guaranteed income stream. That evening, as the delegation departed, the ranch held its first harvest celebration. Apache and White, former enemies and outlaws, gathered to share food and stories. Old Mateo played his guitar while Apache singers shared traditional songs. Children of both communities played together, their parents watching with cautious hope. Harlan found himself standing with the 3 sisters, watching the celebration. Your father's map brought all this, he said. No, Anoki corrected. Your courage in cutting us down started it. The map was just lines on paper. You made it real. We made it real, Harlan insisted. All of us. As the celebration continued into the night, Victorio approached them. The old chief had been watching, evaluating, judging. I was wrong, he said simply. This path you've chosen, it's not surrender, it's adaptation, survival through change rather than resistance to change. Will you join us? Anoki asked. Some of my people will, others, he shrugged. Others will choose their own path. But what you've built here gives us options we didn't have before. As the night grew late and the celebration wound down, Harlan stood once more on his porch, looking at the stars. The sisters stood with him, along with Vale Coulter and others who'd become friends through shared struggle. What's next? Vale asked. We keep building, Harlan said. Keep proving that different peoples can work together. Keep showing that prosperity shared is better than conflict. And if someone tries to destroy what we've built, Coulter asked. Then we defend it, Anoki said firmly, together. A year later, the Dry Laurel Ranch had become the Dry Laurel Settlement, a thriving town where Apache and White lived and worked side by side. The water consortium had expanded, bringing irrigation to thousands of acres, creating prosperity that benefited everyone. The 3 sisters had become respected leaders in the community. Anoki served as sheriff, keeping peace between the various groups. Sana managed the consortium's finances, ensuring fair distribution of profits. Tevi had become the territory's leading water engineer, her designs copied throughout the West. Harlan, despite his protests, had been elected territorial representative, carrying the message of cooperation to the capital. On the anniversary of that fateful night, they gathered at the spot where the old barn had stood, now the site of a school where Apache and White children learned together. Did you ever imagine this? Sana asked. Never, Harlan admitted. I just wanted to save 3 lives. And ended up saving hundreds, Tevi added. We saved each other, Anoki said. That's what partners do. As they stood together watching the sun set over their transformed land, Catherine Pike approached. She'd become an unexpected ally, her business acumen helping the consortium thrive. There's news from Washington, she said. Congress is considering making this a model for Indian integration throughout the territories. Integration, Victorio said from behind them. He'd taken to visiting regularly. Not removal, not war, but integration. It's a start, Harlan said. It's a revolution, Victorio corrected. Bloodless, but still a revolution. That night, as Harlan walked through the town that had grown from a single act of decency, he encountered the various people whose lives had been changed. Former outlaws working as lawmen, Apache warriors teaching traditional skills to white children, farmers of all backgrounds sharing knowledge and resources. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks, conflicts, moments when everything nearly fell apart. But they'd persevered, held together by mutual need that had slowly transformed into mutual respect and for some genuine friendship. He found himself back at the ranch house, now expanded to accommodate offices for the consortium. The three sisters were there planning the next phase of development. "We're thinking of building a hospital," Sana said. "Doc Rosamond would run it. And a proper courthouse," Anoki added. "Make this official territorial business." "A university eventually," Tevi said dreamily, "where Apache knowledge and white knowledge can be taught together." "Dreams," Harlan said, but he was smiling. "Dreams built on water and determination," Anoki corrected. "The best kind." As the night deepened, Harlan stood once more under the stars, reflecting on the journey. $35 had bought him land, but what he'd really purchased was a chance to prove that enemies could become allies, that cooperation could triumph over conflict, that the future didn't have to repeat the past. "No regrets?" Anoki asked, joining him. "None," Harlan said firmly. "Every challenge, every threat, every moment of fear, it all led to this." "And what is this exactly?" Harlan gestured to the thriving settlement, the irrigated fields, the peaceful mixing of peoples who'd been at war for generations. "Hope," he said simply. "This is hope." 5 years after that night, a monument was erected where the barn once stood. It showed 3 figures representing the sisters being cut down from hanging, and below it, an inscription in Apache and English. "From the worst of humanity's cruelty can grow the best of humanity's hope. Here enemies became partners, hatred became understanding, and a $35 purchase became priceless. Let all who pass remember courage, compassion, and cooperation can transform any desert into a garden." At the dedication, hundreds gathered, Apache and white, rich and poor, former enemies, now friends. Harlan stood with the 3 sisters, all of them older, weathered by the struggles they'd faced, but stronger for having faced them together. "Was it worth it?" a young journalist asked them. "All the pain and struggle." The sisters looked at each other, then at Harlan, then at the thriving community around them. "Ask the children playing together who would have been taught to hate," Anoki said. "Ask the families prospering who would have been destroyed. Ask the land itself blooming where there was only dust." "Every scar was worth it," Sana added. "Every tear led to this," Tevi concluded. Harlan nodded, looking at the monument. $35 and 3 shadows in a barn, that's how it started. But what it became? He smiled, thinking of all the lives changed, all the futures made possible. What it became was worth any price. As the sun set over dry Laurel that day, painting the prosperous valley in shades of gold, the 3 sisters and the horse trainer who'd saved them stood together, partners to the end, proof that even in the harshest desert, with enough courage and compassion, hope could bloom. The ranch that blood had threatened to destroy had become the foundation for a new world built not on conquest, but on cooperation, not on dominance, but on partnership. And at its heart were 3 Apache women who'd refused to die, and 1 stubborn man who'd refused to let them bound together by a deed worth $35 and a partnership worth infinitely more.